Welcome in. It is the Take Command pregame show live on 106.7 The Fan. The Team 980 is burgundy and gold game day. Logan Paulsen there, Craig Hoffman here. Hope that you are having a great start to your Sunday. We are with you for the next 3 hours up until kickoff live at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. Of course, doors open here at 11, so we hope to see you in person. Apparently, traffic not that bad this morning, Logan.
That bad.
You were here so early.
Whipped over here this morning.
So come on down, hang out, and talk some ball with us here on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. So, Logan, obviously today, big bounce back day is what the hope is for the Commanders. They've had 10 days to stew on this. They've had 10 days to make corrections, 10 days to self-scout. Yeah. How do you look at the bounce back element, whatever that means, emotionally, schematically, whatever it means after the 40-20 loss to the Bears?
Yeah, I mean, just in general, when I'm doing like NFL pick'ems or whatever, we do that show on NFL, Around the NFL, that's a segment on the show that we do. And I'm always kind of the mindset that teams that get embarrassed will play better the next week. And it's because you have this sense of professionalism, the sense of pride. College kids have it, obviously high school kids have it, but I think the professional element of the NFL allows for that to be a little bit more kind of at the forefront, right? And I think the extra time is going to be a big benefit to this group in terms of saying these are some things we need to get corrected. You listen to John Kimes' podcast, you listen to the pressers this week, it's all about doing your job. And I think when you turn on the film, specifically from the Bears game, from the Philadelphia game, there's a lot of opportunities for guys who just need to be in the right position. And it's so interesting kind of, as a former player, thinking back to my time, like the best teams I was on, like the 2012, Washington Redskins, they weren't the most talented teams, but you did have 11 guys on offense who were going to be where they're supposed to be and do what they're supposed to do. And I think there is so much value. Like everyone always wants, the Julio Joneses, the Justin Jeffersons, these guys that are like these dynamic playmakers. But if you just do what you're supposed to do and give it everything you've got to do it, there's value there. And I think if this team can get to that point, get to that mindset, I think it's going to be obviously beneficial, but I think it's going to lead to a win, especially against the Falcons team that is kind of more in that mold already. They are a team that does their job seemingly, when you watch the film, very consistently at a high level with good energy, and I think Washington can learn a lot from that. So.
Yeah, no, I think it's a team in Atlanta that presents some very interesting challenges, right? Like, you look at them compared to the Bears, and there's some similarities there. Like, they're pretty unique offensively in their approach in a modern NFL, kind of how they go about their business. They're going to be a run-first team. They've got a pretty unique weapon in Bijan. Obviously, Fields probably more unique in terms of skill set by position, but Bijan can do a little bit of everything. And I think that when you have 10 days to prepare for that, and you have the bounce, obviously, like we can talk more about the emotional side of it, but like schematically, okay, you got a full week. Like you should be ready. Yeah. As opposed to, I think it's going to be, I think like the best case scenario for this team is we go back within the next couple of weeks here and we go, oh, that was a huge, like Thursday night was the issue more than anything else in that game if they turn things around. But at the end of the day, like you do have to ultimately do it. You do have to ultimately like go out and execute, and that brings us to kind of the other big story of the week, which is like the do your job mantra that they have now. We talked about this on the podcast, I thought, really well this week, of like doing your job is not as simple as like, hey, this is the thing, go out and do it. Like, hey, Logan, go talk into a microphone. It's how do you do it? How do you, and also the jobs can be complicated. Sure. And I think that's, to me, what's most interesting this week is, do the guys, like defensively especially, do they just play faster? Yeah. Like you talk about some of these teams that are not super talented in Arizona, Houston, but they fly around to the football. Yeah. I don't feel like when I watch Washington's defense, they fly around to the football despite the team speed that they have. So how do they make the mental part of the game clearer so that everybody clearly understands their assignment and off they go, playing fast, playing physical, and playing up ultimately to their potential? Yeah,
I think you touched on a lot of stuff there. I think this idea that they should be ready is one that gets me excited, but it also gets me really nervous, because think about this fan base. If they come out and they don't look ready, like what happens then? And that's something, again, that makes me, because I want to talk about good football. I want to talk about good process. And to your point, like the second part of that question is, how do you get them with all of this talent to play to that speed, to play with that intensity. And like when you watch good defenses at the moment, I think, San Francisco comes to mind. Arizona's not a great defense statistically, but in terms of the personnel that they have, I think they're elevated by just their effort. And I think when you watch Houston, they are ripping to the football. When you watch Atlanta, they're ripping to the football. When you watch New Orleans, they're ripping to the football. And where does that come from? And, Fred Smoot talked about how, previous defensive coordinators they had that really drove that point home. It was as a daily thing, a daily effort thing, a daily grind, a daily physicality. And, everyone, like we're both sports performance coaches, and one of the things that I love about the new NFL is they've gotten away from kind of the hard stuff just to be hard, But
Right.
I do think that there is some value there from a mental conditioning standpoint. And I wonder if this team has that true kind of mental conditioning, mental toughness, that razor's edge of just like, it's so binary. It's like I am or I'm not running to the football. And if
Right.
I'm not running the football, I'm wrong, and it's the same thing. Like, on good, again, I go back to offense. I played offense. On good offense I played for, it's like, are you finishing? Yes or no? And it wasn't like, oh, I'm kind of finishing. It was like guys were either sprinting to the football, like Pierre Garçon is sprinting 25 yards down the field for a block, or he's not. And he would be the first one to tell you, hey, I got to finish better here, or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? And I think, and that's something, I don't know how you build it without kind of that old hardo toughness, because that's the only way I've seen it be built. But I need to see, to your point, to the fans' point, they've been talking about it all week. That's something I think everybody wants to see, and that coincides. It's all encompassed in this, like, do your job, because part of your job as a defensive player is to finish at the football. Like, one of the standards that I love is, like, Mercedes Lewis used to tell me this all the time when we played in college together. Is like, finish in the shot, and that sounds kind of crazy, but like, I want to be in the shot when they're kind of tight zooming on the ball carrier.
Right.
I want to be there. And as an offensive player, you want that. And as a defensive player, you especially want that. You want hats to the football. So that is something that I think is, you talk about coaching and the job's complicated. Effort, man. Effort is something that shouldn't be hard.
Right. And we talked about effort, and I think this is an important, like, let's hold on for a second on the effort, because it's where you apply your effort.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because we talked about, for instance, the play with Benjamin St. Juste last week, right? So our first play of the drive, we were sitting right here still on Thursday night. It was so early in the game that there's a gigantic TV right above our heads if you're watching on YouTube.
It is big.
That you can't see.
What is that? It's like a 16 box. It's
well,
gigantic.
It's like, I don't know. That's probably like a 39-inch TV. Like, each square is a 39-inch TV, and there's 16 of them.
Yeah.
So I'll leave that math to you.
Yeah, that's a lot of math.
But the point is we're breaking down our equipment Thursday night. We look up, and it's 3rd and 9, and Benjamin St. Juste gets beat on this double move. And it's not that he's not trying.
No.
Right? But his effort isn't channeled in the right place.
That's true.
And when you're mentally confused or not clear, it can look like it's a lack of effort. Or if you're playing too many snaps, and this is like another thing on the D-line, F.A. Obata back today, which is huge for this team. I think you and I both are fairly confused as to why, or don't have any clarity why, James Smith-Williams and Casey Tuhill did not play more.
To that point, though, Craig, like when you talk to people, coaches in the building, they're like, we need to get that rotation more. We need
to, they're the ones in charge of it.
They're aware of it, but I also think that there is amongst the defensive line, and like as a former player, like, you played pickup basketball. It's like, you don't want to come out, you want to play. That's what you're there for. I don't think guys understand that I am getting tired, and when I'm tired, I'm less effective. And so having those conversations with the player, especially when they're high-powered guys, like big contract guys, I think is really challenging, and that's something it sounds like they're working through, and it's something that I want to see. Like, those guys are better when they're fresher. I think last year they averaged about 40 snaps a game, maybe 45 if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Now they're playing around 60.
It's crazy.
It's a huge increase. And so to that point, you want that effort to be dialed in and locked in but you want, I guess you want the effort per snap to be higher. Would be what I'd say.
Right.
And then, like Benjamin.
But that's not for a lack of care.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? It's not because they're mentally like, I don't really care about this play, right?
But
it's like the coaches have to set them up, and this is on the players too, to cooperate.
Yeah, right.
Right.
You got to cooperate.
But like, you have to actually set them up to succeed, and whether that's mental clarity on exactly what the assignment is, whether that's getting the rotation right, all that stuff, I think goes into the ability to play fast, play physical, and play with maximum effort.
Yeah, and I think I think that's a great point you bring up, especially because you talked to St. Jude's. John Keim interviewed him about that play on his podcast, and for him to say, "Oh, I have help inside. I don't need to undercut that. I don't need to apply my effort in that way." I think the effort I'm talking, because that's 100% accurate. Like, that effort needs to be applied in a specific way, in an accurate way. There's also an effort, like kind of a junk effort, that most good defenses play with, and that's the effort of, hey, the running back gets out in the flat and we get all the D-line to the ball. And that's, again, they got to cooperate with the rotation. They got to cooperate with the sub. But that kind of junk effort, I want to see more of that. I call it junk effort, but it's important. It's important effort, but
right. It's almost a mentality thing.
Yeah, it's a mentality thing. And I think the effort you're talking about, I 100% agree with that, but I also want to see more of that. Like, hey, the ball's in the flat, and it looks like someone's going to make the tackle, and a good example is in the Bears game. And I'm not going to and again, guys get tired. Football's hard. All those things are true. Forbes goes for the tackle. Benjamin St. Juste is and Forrest are they're running, but they're not sprinting to the football. Breaks the tackle. If they're sprinting to the football, instead of being a 35-yard gain, they probably get an extra 2 yards on that because they are there. And I think that's a mindset and something that is really, really challenging, and it's hard, and football's tough in that way. But I think that's something that, coming off the layoff like you talked about, are they going to be fresher? Can we dial that in a little bit more and be better with that kind of, again, junk effort? Obviously, you need to be better with your specific effort and your specific focus, but the junk effort, I think, also can be better too. And I think that's something with the defense specifically that, because they're so talented and because they're so physically gifted, you just want the best for them. You want them to kind of control the variables that they can control. And I think that's something that today against Atlanta, because of the style of football that they play, you're going to need to see it.
It's also a chance to make plays too. And, there was a play, I'm trying to remember who they were playing, but the week before the Eagles played these guys the first time, Jalen Carter forces a fumble. It was the Monday night game against the Bucs, right?
The Bucs, that's exactly right.
And it's because he hustles back down the field, and all of a sudden an unexpected cutback comes, and he's able to punch the ball back out. You just don't know when the play is going to come back to you. So for these guys, and that's where so many, we've seen it on the wrong end of it, how many of the fumbles this year have happened, Logan Thomas, Antonio Gibson, when guys are going second, third efforts offensively.
I got a funny story about that. You want to hear a funny story?
When do I not want to hear a funny story?
So in 2013, I had the weirdest, someone told me this, and I don't even know if this is true, but someone came to me in our stats department and said, "Hey, Logan, you have the most fumble recoveries from your own team of anybody in the division." I said, "That's a weird statistic." But it wasn't like I was trying to go out and recover all these fumbles. Like, my mindset was just like, I'm not a good football player. Like, I'm well aware of that. Like, it was just play as hard as you can for as long as you can was really my philosophy. And so you're around the ball, you're blocking somebody, you're around the pile, I'm in the shot, and the ball pops down. It's like, oh, I'm just going to jump on that because it's right there. And so it can lead to good things, very productive things. And I think I had four fumble recoveries that year just being near the pile, And I think that, effort in that context is never a negative. And I think that's something, guys need to be fresher. Guys need to be healthier, whatever it is. Like, all those things are important. But that's something against this Falcons team, because of how they play offensively, because of how they play defensively, I think we're going to need to see a little bit more of it. And I fully expect to. I fully expect to see that today.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, when we get back, though, we're going to actually look more at the other side of the ball. We're going to take a look at the Commanders' offense against the Falcons' defense that is ripe for the picking if you can do a couple of things. So we will discuss what those things are next. It is the Take Command pregame show live on a burgundy and gold game day.
But my favorite story is, I think we were playing Cincinnati. Was it Cincinnati?
That's not what depends on the story, but maybe we were playing Cincinnati.
So Logan catches this touchdown.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Cincinnati. Yep.
It was Cincinnati. So we put in this play, and it was like, I think we called it Hoss Juke or something like that. I can't remember what we called it in that offense, but Logan's on a seam, right? So he's our vertical threat, taking the top off the defense.
Digging out, guys.
We're talking in the week. I don't think we ever said it in the install with those guys, but they're like, listen, Logan's not even in the progression. He's taking the top off this thing. We're trying to work this little option route down. And they bust this coverage. And I mean, he is screaming wide open.
I wasn't even supposed to be on the play. They were supposed to sub somebody else in because I thought I was too slow to run this route. Just for the context here for everybody.
So he's screaming wide open. And I'm like, Matt, throw it at his back shoulder. You might hit him in stride. If you try and back shoulder him. Threw it right at him. He catches it. It was an awesome touchdown. Yeah. Just the celebration afterwards was so much fun. For me, it was always fun celebrating the touchdowns with the guys that didn't score them all the time. You know, like
take that, Julio Jones.
Yeah, and I'm not, I'm saying that, but like your role for us was you did the dirty work, and when you see guys that do the dirty work get rewarded for it, that was really cool. Something I'll never forget. The caveman. Yeah. And the caveman was in there in the end zone celebrating. It was awesome.
So there was this play where we call it like it was, what is it, 19 Zorro. So basically like versus a 3-4 structure with an outside linebacker who is Von Miller in this case, I would get help from the fullback, like on inside help. So I could be really aggressive on my reach, really violent to the reach. And so it was me and DY, is a physical son of a gun. And so we take Von Miller and we put him, like, no joke, in the water cooler. Like, we put him way out there on the sideline. And we were like, this guy ain't nothing. Like, we're going to, we were so fired up. And so it ended up being like a 25 or 30 yard gain. So we were all fired up. And Kyle's like, all right, let's come back to it. So like 2 plays later, we're running again and we're running to the right. And I was like, oh man, we are about to tee this dude up real quick. Just tune him up nice and good. And so I go out to get him and I'm firing off the ball. My hat's low. I'm flat back. And I swear to God, like he was about as close as my hand was to my face. And he just disappeared into like mist. And he like swung me and I fell right on my face. And I just was like, oh my gosh. And like I went back and watched the film and it was crazy how quickly he was able to like do his little basketball weave and then like just disappear from my vision and get inside and make the tackle. And I was like, oh, so now he's upset. So then the next play, I'm like all tentative and nervous. And I felt like Vaughn did. I watched this on film, so I knew he did this. But he does a really good job of like kind of like playing it like a boxer a little bit. You know what I mean? Like kind of rope-a-doping you a little bit. So like he lets you get one, right? Where I got after him. He makes you look like an idiot. And then the next time I was super tentative on him, and he literally did like a double stick like he was going to make me miss, and then just grabbed my neck and then threw me over the pile. I was like, man, this is going to be tough. I got to like think of a plan here in the next 15 minutes so I don't look like an idiot for the rest of the game. But, when you're playing elite football players like him, like there's a...
Welcome back, Take Command pregame show live on a burgundy and gold game day. 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980, streaming live on both stations' YouTube channels as well. Where we are also monitoring the London game as well as getting ready for Commanders and Falcons. 9-3 the score. Ravens just got in the end zone. I guess they had a safety and then they just kicked a touchdown.
Yeah,
or was that 3 field goals?
I'm trying to figure out we got into it late.
Yeah, we got into it a little late. We were focused
on the opening of our show.
On the opening of our show. We will now continue with our show, the one that previews the Commanders and Falcons. So, Logan, the Commanders' offense.
Yeah.
They also obviously want to be more consistent.
Sure.
They have been, I don't know, it's not quite as bad in terms of the inconsistency as the defense. You've had these really nice stretches and then these really bad stretches. I think the percentages skew a little differently. The offense probably been better than the defense so far this year. But how do they put it together for 60 minutes is kind of the big thing that Eric Bieniemy, who, as we talked about last week, EB doesn't say anything at the podium. The man will give a 2-minute answer with zero substance. It's really quite a skill. Very, very, very good at the coach speak. But he did this week kind of give a little bit of like, yeah, our big thing right now is how do we get 60 minutes of consistent effort, 60 minutes of consistent execution, as opposed to these short bursts that we've been able to get. When EB goes back and does a self-scout over this last week, what do you think he sees in ways that he can get more consistency out of this offense, and especially when applied to a game plan for Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I think is the million-dollar question. It's one of those questions, Craig, you ask, and it's like if I had the answer to it, I would be Bill Belichick. You know, I would be the best coach in the NFL. Whoever Bill Belichick's struggling right now. But
yeah,
the point is
Bill Belichick when I had Tom Brady.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. And I think one of the things is when you look at the offensive game flow, when this team is really clicking, and this is true of every offense, so it's not like great analysis, but it's when they can stay on the field, consistently convert on on second and third down. So the reason I include second down in there is because let's say you have an explosive on second down, you stay out of those third down situations.
Right. The best way to convert on third down is to never have it.
And then you can find explosive plays in the context of this offense is a little bit different in my estimation, just from observing. It's like, these 15-play chunks. When they can find those, they're executing at a high level, they're on the field, they're going to move the football, and they're going to play well. To me, and that's the million-dollar question, is how do you increase your efficiency in those situations? And so what I would say, just from a super high level, is I go back to the game that I think EB called the best, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles game. I thought he did an excellent job. We're gonna run the football, not a ton, but run it enough. Quick game, move the pocket, all these different things, and we're going to be very, very, very specific about when we want to find a chunk. Like I think about the Logan Thomas catch in the strike zone there in the Philly game, and I'm like, man, that was perfectly called. You got the right coverage. You didn't press. There wasn't, and I just think that's the right way to do it. And so I guess if we're trying to stay on the field and be more consistent, as EB as a play caller, I think says this is the formula that seems to be working well. I think this week, especially against the Falcons, it's going to be okay. Like, you can trust the game flow a little bit. And they probably said the same thing against the Bears. The Bears come out with a couple explosive plays, and the game flow is all shot to hell. But, but I think that's kind of the general roadmap I would follow. And so, obviously, converting on third down is not it's not, oh, we run the ball or we pass the ball. It's like, what is our offense most effective with, and what matchup do we like the most in those situations, and just making sure you key in on that and feel good about it, I guess.
Yeah, I think, too, one thing that's kind of almost forgotten about the Bears game is, like, it could have looked different in the first half if you hit a couple of shots. Like, De'Ami Brown is wide open.
That's a great point.
Wide open. And I think early they had a better – I mean, Robinson had, like, 6 carries in the game, and he didn't have a carry after the midway point of the second quarter because they didn't run the ball at all after, I think, the 8:54 point. So, like, if you tell me Brian Robinson's got 6 carries through, like, a quarter plus, that's a pretty good pace.
Yeah,
like, they were kind of on pace to do that, and then the game went sideways, upside down, and backwards, and so long to that game flow. Antonio Gibson doesn't even get a carry in the game. They never get to the next level of their run game. So I think that today, as you said, like, one of the things that we've now mentioned in terms of like a term here on the show that we've talked about extensively on the Take Command podcast this week that we should probably define for the radio audience that may not be as familiar is game flow, right? Yeah. So, like, basketball terms, right, is this a team that's run up and down the court fast break, or are they trying to play like a slower half-court offense? And the Atlanta Falcons are as slow of a half-court offense as you have in the NFL. They want to run the football. They want, as opposed to trying to get 8, 9 drives in a game. They would love it if it's a 6 drive per team kind of game.
Yeah.
Like, that is what they want. And because of that, the score is never going to be too far out of reach. With that, I would actually try to push the tempo a little bit. Yeah. Obviously, you always want to find the right shot. So this works in conjunction with what you're saying, not pushing back against it. But, like, do you find Terry McLaurin a couple of times deep and take those shots? Like, can you engineer those so that you are truly pushing the ball down the field, making Atlanta feel like they've got to chase the game, they're uncomfortable offensively, and using your offense to kind of help your defense out in that way, as opposed to a lot of games where it's like, can we run the football a little bit more, make sure they get the rest, and kind of play what is more traditionally seen as complementary football?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I think, especially in this game, right, it should feel different. I think you want to push the pace a little bit. And the reason I don't think EB needs to do anything differently than what he's doing is because he's always kind of aggressive. Even in the Philly game, that is an aggressive approach. It's like you're throwing the ball a ton, the ball's spraying all around the field, and you are running the football more, but it's still relatively aggressive, and I think that's kind of who he is. So I think that's always kind of baked into his philosophy is he wants to score as many points as possible. Like, that's what he wants to do. He wants to score as many points as possible. And in a game like this, that's exactly what you want to do. There's certain games where you want to manage it. You want to keep the ball away from the Kansas City Chiefs or whoever it is. You want to kind of play a little bit more conservatively, possess the football more. I really don't think that's part of who EB is as a play caller. And I think there's some very positive things and there's some negative things associated with that. But I think in a game like this, it suits you really well. Be aggressive, but instead of being like what I would say, instead of being 100% aggressive, I'd say be 75. Like, manage with an understanding that yes, we want to score points, we want to push the tempo here, we want to get Atlanta out of what they do well and what they feel comfortable with, but also we want to make sure that we are comfortable.
Right.
We're not stressing ourselves, I guess would be my thought.
Right, and that comes down to running the football more, getting the quick game going, the screen game, these things that we've talked about a lot to try to take some off of Sam Howell's plate. Quickly in the minute and a half we have here before we break and then come back with Kevin Sheehan. Danger points on the Atlanta defense.
Yeah, man.
I would say Calais Campbell still is a guy that stylistically could be a tough matchup for Wiley.
Yeah.
Bull rush, power player.
Yep.
Grady Jarrett, one of the best nose tackles in football. Jesse Bates is awesome at safety.
Yeah, I think those guys are the ones that jump out to you. Jesse Bates is a guy that when you're just watching the film, he consistently jumps out. Calais is good. Grady Jarrett is good. Their D-line is a bunch of, it's a solid bunch of guys. It's not like, how we were talking about the Bears and there wasn't really anybody that, stood out?
How'd that go?
These guys are a little bit more positive. Like, they're just better football players. They play better as a group. They play harder. They're more physical. I like the group a lot. But there's no, big name that's getting all the sacks or getting all the pressure. So I think that's a pretty good characterization of what they do. And you mentioned the Wiley matchup. I do think that's a really significant thing because he does struggle with pure power players because he's not a huge guy as far as right tackles go. But to me, the guy you got to be aware of is Jesse Bates because I think he just does a great job of playing physical football, making really tough tackles in space, and really making the defense go. But also, he does a great job of being manipulative of young quarterbacks. He's going to show you one thing. You're going to think it's there, and then he's going to say, nope, I kind of baited you into this decision, and I'm going to make an interception. So in a game like this, that's, again, this kind of razor's edge you're always walking in these games is I want to be aggressive, I want to score points, but I need to be aware that a turnover in this game is extremely detrimental, right? As Sam Howell, as EB the play caller. So how do I kind of walk this line of making sure we're aggressive while also make sure I'm not leveraging Sam too much to make a decision like he did in the Bears game where he's throwing the ball over the middle of the field to a window that shouldn't be there. And that's not a criticism of Sam. That's young football player development.
Yep.
But EB, that should be at the forefront of this, especially in this game. And again, this defense, they do some stuff on third down from a coverage standpoint, very similar to New Orleans, where the defensive coordinator's from. That is hard. It's hard to manage. It's hard to be successful against. So I think that always needs to be in EB's mind is how do I insulate the quarterback? How do I eliminate the effect of Jesse Bates, for example, on this defense, and make sure Sam is as comfortable as he possibly can be, while maintaining that kind of paradoxical aggression that we need to see. So
yeah, there's a zone. You need to be on the upper end of the zone, but do not leave the zone, EB. Do not leave the zone. All right, that's Logan Paulsen. I'm Craig Hoffman here on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 988 Burgundy and Gold Game Day, where the one and only Kevin Sheehan joins us next.
We have a new submission to the Real Things Hall of Fame. The F-35 is a fighter jet that the military has. It is very expensive. Very expensive. The F-35 program costs the U.S. government / the military over $1 trillion. Like, this is one of the most expensive things in the U.S. government's budget is the program that makes these planes. Each one is incredibly valuable and expensive. And something happened during a training mission, but this jet leaves, they go on a training mission, and it's in stealth mode, apparently, and the pilot has to eject. So the pilot's like, I'm up out of here. Pilot lands relatively safely, has, I think, an injury or two that has to be tended to, but, like, is alive. But then they lost the jet. So the jet disappeared from the radar. The U.S. government's like, well, we don't know where the jet is. And so the Buford, which is the suburb not suburb, it's in South Carolina. It's by Charleston. Close enough. If people are actually from there and don't want to say that and want to say it's by Hilton Head, I know I grew up in the state. Leave my geography alone for the sake of the story, which I've now made less efficient by telling you all of those things because I can't help myself. Talk about a plane crash. Hey, we're back. So the F-35 gets essentially lost, and they're like, I don't know where this very expensive warplane went. And lo and behold, sometime the next day or later that day, it crashes somewhere, and luckily no one's hurt. But this $100 million plane is gone. Whoopsies, we crashed the plane. And this is an eyewitness account from a Charleston area television station of someone who heard the crash.
In the bathroom taking a shave, and I heard a screeching, between a screech and a whistle. I said, what in the world is this? And I heard a boom. Then my whole house shook.
White says he didn't realize it was a plane at the time, so he didn't call anybody.
The first thought came to me, I said, what's a meteorite coming out of space or something? And I said, well, if the airplane, it needed to be reported, but the thing was flying just too low.
The F-35B airplane wreckage created an extensive debris field.
That voice, we gotta get a drop for the voice because it might be better than Steph Curry's.
I was gonna say, I feel like we have to do a comparison. Can I pull this off with? Yeah, okay. So I had to compare or see if I had enough channels on the board to do this. But we got Steph Curry here. We got Charlie Brown here. And we got our mans here.
His is better, though.
I think his is the best one. His is definitely, it's not quite Charlie Brown. It's definitely close to Steph Curry, though.
Yes.
We'll see you tomorrow.
It's not the Hoffman Show. It's the Take Man
there you
pregame
go.
show.
Nice.
It's the
Good
Take
job.
Man.
Good save.
Yeah! I should put that on
we
the.
We have to call attention to it.
It's all right. We have a fine board on our show, like a fine system. I think that's a fine on me, even though it's not that show.
It's not that show.
It is the Take Command pregame show here on the Team 980, 106.7 The Fan. Burgundy and Gold game day. That show, 4 to 7, the Hoffman Show, on the Team 980, just a couple hours after our good friend Kevin Sheehan wraps up 10 to 1 weekdays on the Team 980, and he joins us a half hour into the show each and every pregame Burgundy and Gold game day. Kevin, how are you, sir?
What's up, guys? How you doing this morning?
Doing well. Always appreciate your time on a Sunday. We've been talking about, obviously, the need for the Commanders to bounce back. I guess, how important is this game? Is in a way a silly question because they could lose today and then go on a 4-game winning streak, and all of a sudden we look back in hindsight and it's it wasn't that quote-unquote important. But when you think of kind of where we are in the larger context, new ownership, the fan base being upset as they are because of that performance on Thursday night, how do you put into context the meaning of performing well today?
Yeah, but that's actually a really good point, Craig. It's like the NFL season is so long, and all of us that watch it understand that, a team that looks horrible right now actually might be a decent team in 5 or 6 weeks. It just changes that dramatically. But the context around this team is new ownership and what's ownership going to do. Is Ron essentially a lame duck with the rest of the staff, or maybe with part of his staff, with others coming back? There's this quarterback, learning experience this year going on, and then you throw into it one of the worst beatings any team's taken all year long in the NFL in the first half of their last game. Interestingly, like, they lost by 20 points, and they got their what's kicked in the first 2.5 quarters, but I still think if Joe Fly makes that field goal and makes it 30-23, it's a legitimate ball game with them having a chance to win it. But that aside, all of that context makes this kind of important today, because 2-4 will seem like 2-12, and all of the heat that's already been on them for 9, 10, 11 days will be back on them, and they can take it all off by winning today and getting to 500. So it's one of those early portions of the schedule for a team with the kind of stuff that they've got going on that's kind of big for them. And it's winnable.
Yeah, I mean, you said it's winnable. Why do you think it's winnable, Kev?
Well, I mean, it's winnable because Atlanta's not going to, they don't have, I don't think, explosiveness. And, we talked before that Chicago game. I think the one thing that we saw with the Bears, especially the previous week, is they did have, a quarterback that could make a lot of plays. They had a receiver that was a legitimate number one, a tight end that was interesting, a running back that was interesting. And I thought that, it was possible that Chicago would be better offensively than most thought. Today, the Falcons, they're 3-0 at home, and all of these games have been decided in the fourth quarter, including 2 essentially walk-off field goals. So it is doable today against a team that's 3-2, well coached, by the way. And I don't know, I haven't listened to you guys so far this morning, but I would assume, Logan, you think this is a well-coached team.
Very.
Both sides of the ball. But, this is the kind of game that I think should be there, given the effort and the energy, which was lacking last Thursday night. Clearly, you give that kind of effort and energy that you had in Philadelphia, and this is a winnable game.
Definitely. Kevin Sheehan with us, of course, host of the Kevin Sheehan Show, 10-1 on the team 980. They're well coached, is Atlanta, and they are built around a running back, a rookie running back who is a top 10 pick. After seeing, 5 games in, this will be week 6, of Bijan Robinson, what did you think of that draft pick for Atlanta at the time, and what do you make of it now, seeing how good he is?
Well, I mean, it's like linebackers and running backs. Apparently, this rule now, you're not allowed to draft them in the first round. If there's greatness on your board, and that board says this is the best player by miles on your board, you take that player regardless of position. And he appears to be that kind of guy. I mean, he's incredible in space. By the way, Tyler Algier is really good too.
Yeah.
He is phenomenal as a physical yards after contact runner. Today's going to be one of those days where if there isn't energy on defense like you had in previous games, but not last Thursday night, they're going to be 6-7 yard runs after contact. But I love both of those guys, Craig. And then they also have, let's not forget, like the jack of all trades in the NFL for the last 10 years or 8 years. Cordarrelle Patterson's back. I don't know if they'll use him offensively. He'll be in the return game he was last week. But they have an identity. Like, very few teams actually go out there trying to create an identity. They want to be a run-first team. They drafted that way. They drafted that way in the second round as well with the kid from Syracuse, Bergeron.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about Syracuse football this weekend. Just keep moving, Kevin. Keep going. Yeah, that was yikes. Bad.
I had them too, by the way. That was the total.
Silly you.
But Atlanta is going to try to beat you up and come at you with the run, and then Ritter's coming off the best game of his young career, so there's some confidence maybe brewing there too.
That's something I'd like to double click on, is because I think this offense, when you look at it, you say they're not maybe the most explosive offense in the world, but they do have kind of unique playmakers: Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, all these different guys. But the thing that I think is interesting, the engine that makes it all go is Desmond Ridder. And like you said, he had the best game of his young career last week. Do you think that's who he is, or are the other 3 games kind of more the Desmond Ridder we should expect? Because I think if we get the Desmond Ridder from the first 3 weeks, this should be, I don't want to say an easy win, but a very reasonable game we should win.
Yeah, I have no idea what to expect. He was one of those guys coming out that I didn't have a really good feel for one way or the other. If anything, I thought that his early portion of his career at Cincinnati, he didn't look like an NFL quarterback until that final year, and they were in the Final Four. They were in a playoff game with Luke Fickell as their head coach. I don't know, but you mentioned the other guys. I mean, what they do have is they have size. I mean, London's big, Pitts is big, Matt Collins is big, and they block. What's interesting, Logan? I'm surprised that Desmond Ridder hasn't been as much a part of the run game as Arthur Smith's quarterbacks have been in the past. Whether it was Tannehill or Mariota, they really aren't using him as a true dual threat in the way that Arthur Smith's used quarterbacks previously. I thought he was capable of doing that, but maybe they don't want to see him do that.
Yeah, I think that's something that really hurts that offense's efficiency. Like when you watch last year's Atlanta game and compare it to what Atlanta's doing now, like one of the things that got Atlanta out of a lot of kind of 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6 issues was the zone read. And it's in that offense with how effectively they run the outside zone, it's like a cheat code. And for whatever reason, they use it, but it's like instead of 10 to 15 plays a game, it's 3 to 5, and I think it really, really hurts that the composition of that offense.
Yeah. All right, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, if you have a quick thought on that, we're just going to move on to the rest of the league.
11 on 11 in the run game when the quarterback's a part of it, and that's been a part of Arthur Smith's offense, and it hasn't been for whatever reason this year with Ridder.
Yeah, definitely. All right, who else you like today around the league?
I like Seattle a little bit. I like Seattle at Cincinnati plus the points, plus the 3, and I like the Bucks a little bit today at home against the Lions. There you go.
Oh,
okay.
Right.
Hopefully that goes better than your Saturday, at least the Syracuse part of it.
Saturday was not good.
Who do you like in our game in Washington, Atlanta?
I mean, I think it's a game that you expect in this league. Teams that embarrass themselves, typically they bounce back, and they're much different the next week.
Yeah.
The next week never looks like the previous week, so I expect them to play well and have a chance to win today, something like 21-19, something like that.
That is exactly the score that I picked
on
the show.
I think I picked that score.
It's probably on all of our brains because that was the score of the Atlanta Houston game last week. That's why we all must have said 21-19. Well, I don't know how many 21-19 games there have been in NFL history, but apparently we think there's a lot. That's Kevin Sheehan, 10-1 each and every weekday on the Team 980, the Kevin Sheehan Show podcast as well. Sheehan, thank you very much, sir, and we will talk to you next week.
All right, guys, have a good day.
All right, when we get back here on the Take Command pregame show, we will take a look at some of what Ron Rivera had to say this week, our Coach Speaks segment, and then the Junkies will be joining us at the top of the hour. It is the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day.
But my favorite story is, I think we were playing Cincinnati. Was it Cincinnati?
That's not what depends on the story, but maybe we were playing Cincinnati.
So Logan catches this touchdown.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Cincinnati. Yep.
It was Cincinnati. So we put in this play, and it was like, I think we called it Hoss Juke or something like that. I can't remember what we called it in that offense, but Logan's on a seam, right? So he's our vertical threat, taking the top off the defense.
Digging out, guys.
We're talking in the week. I don't think we ever said it in the install with those guys, but they're like, listen, Logan's not even in the progression. He's taking the top off this thing. We're trying to work this little option route down. And they bust this coverage. And I mean, he is screaming wide open.
I wasn't even supposed to be on the play. They were supposed to sub somebody else in because I thought I was too slow to run this route. Just for the context here for everybody.
So he's screaming wide open. And I'm like, Matt, throw it at his back shoulder. You might hit him in stride. If you try and back shoulder him. Threw it right at him. He catches it. It was an awesome touchdown. Just the celebration afterwards was so much fun. For me, it was always fun celebrating the touchdowns with the guys that didn't score them all the time. You know, like
take that, Julio Jones.
Yeah, and I'm not, I'm saying that, but like your role for us was you did the dirty work, and when you see guys that do the dirty work get rewarded for it, that was really cool. Something I'll never forget. The caveman, man. The caveman was in there in the end zone celebrating. It was awesome.
So there was this play where we call it like it was, what is it, 19 Zorro. So basically like versus a 3-4 structure with an outside linebacker who is Von Miller in this case, I would get help from the fullback, like on inside help. So I could be really aggressive on my reach, really violent to the reach. And so it's me and DY, is a physical son of a gun. And so we take Von Miller and we put him, like, no joke, in the water cooler. Like, we put him way out there on the sideline. And we were like, this guy ain't nothing. Like, we're going to, we were so fired up. And so it ended up being like a 25 or 30-yard gain. So we were all fired up. And then Kyle's like, all right, let's come back to it. So like 2 plays later, we're running again, and we're running to the right. And I was like, oh, man, we are about to tee this dude up real quick. Just tune him up nice and good. And so I go out to get him, and I'm firing off the ball. My hat's low. I'm flat back. And I swear to God, like he was about as close as my hand was to my face. And he just disappeared into like mist. And he like swung me, and I fell right on my face. And I just was like, oh my gosh. And like I went back and watched the film, and it was crazy how quickly he was able to like do his little basketball weave and then like just disappear from my vision and get inside and make the tackle. And I was like, oh, so now he's upset. So then the next play, I'm like all tentative and nervous. And I felt like Vaughn did. I watched this on film, so I knew he did this. But he does a really good job of like kind of like playing it like a boxer a little bit. You know what I mean? Like kind of rope-a-doping you a little bit. So like he lets you get one, right? Where I got after him. He makes you look like an idiot. And then the next time I was super tentative on him, and he literally did like a double stick like he was going to make me miss, and then just grabbed my neck and then threw me over the pile. I was like, man, this is going to be tough. I got to like think of a plan here in the next 15 minutes so I don't look like an idiot for the rest of the game. But, when you're playing elite football players like him, like there's a reason they're elite. So if you get one on them, it's probably because they want. They probably because they're letting you get one.
It's a trap. It's a trap.
It's a trap.
Take Command pregame show live on a Burgundy and Gold game day. That is Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman. We are not only on your radio, but we are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 and at 106.7 The Fan. Of course, both stations audio streaming on the free Logan,
free
Odyssey app. All right, junkies at the top of the hour. We still need to talk a lot about some of the moving pieces on this Commanders defense as well, but Coach speak this week. We're a little short on time, Logan, so we're not actually going to hear from Ron Rivera. I'm going to simply summarize. But one of the things that I thought was interesting, kind of continuing our conversation from earlier in the hour on the offense, was I feel like this is the first time since Ron hired Eric Bieniemy that the answer to some questions about the offense wasn't simply whatever Eric says.
Right.
For the first time this week, Ron talked about, we kind of need to self-scout a little bit. We need to be able to run the football perhaps a little bit more. We need to find a balance. We need to take things off of Sam's plate. Do you think that is – obviously they're collaborating still.
Sure.
But do you think this is Ron kind of stepping in and being like, hey, man, I know you want to be aggressive, but we gotta be a little bit more careful here? Is this EB coming to that conclusion and Ron just voicing it? Because either way, to me, that is the right approach kind of moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so funny because, like, I think Ron is a very traditional guy in terms of his perspective with regards to football. I think he does a lot of analytics work. I think he's very forward thinking on a lot of stuff. Like when you talk to him in a one-on-one setting, like it's surprising because
Right, which you get to do every single week.
Yeah, it doesn't come across that way all the time, but it is. He's got his reports. He's got all the data. He's got all the percentages. So he's very forward thinking. But I do think he's a little bit traditional in terms of what he thinks about running the football. Because when I look at the offense, like they're pretty efficient when it comes to and I understand there's been a lot of sacks, there's been a lot of pressures, like that's part of it. But I also think that risk is also worth the reward of having a dynamic passing attack. I do think I'm a believer, man. You know, like I'm from the Kyle Shanahan West Coast, you know, like that Kyle Shanahan West Coast philosophy, which you're running the football. You know, it looks very similar to what Arthur Smith does. Like you got to run the football. It dictates a certain mindset. It dictates certain coverage structures, and I think could make it easier for Sam. Now, that being said, that doesn't make it easier for every single quarterback. You know, that doesn't make it easier for every single individual. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like some people don't like play action. Some people like it to see the spread out stuff. Some people like to see the matchups better, whatever it is. So I do think they should run the football, but I'm also trying to kind of catch that in my own bias and say, is that just because I think that they should run the football more, or is that do I think that'll actually benefit? And I think after looking at it and watching it, I think it would benefit them because I think the O-line's pretty good at blocking runs. They're athletic, agile, physical guys who can bend well and kind of fit that model of guys who can run block. And if you can take a couple pass pro snaps off of them, a couple pass pro because again, I think they've actually been pretty efficient. When you look at PFF's numbers, and I don't think they're far off here, they're the 9th best graded offensive line when it comes to pass pro. So PFF kind of says Sam Howell is having a really hard time, you know, not turning these pressures into sacks like we've talked about a ton on the podcast.
Right.
But maybe if we limit some of those exposures, we limit some of the sacks, we limit some of the negative plays. And
some of the hits on Sam, too,
100%.
making sure that he can survive the year.
So I think that's kind of where I'm at with it is like, has the offense been efficient when they're throwing the ball a lot? Yeah. Do they look good? Yeah. All those things are true. But I do think a little bit of balance might kind of manage some of those hits, some of the negative plays, and help the offensive line just take some pressure off them a little bit, which I think is ultimately what you're trying to do.
So then the other part of that, too, though, is the defense. And there is kind of, like, I don't know, just in NFL history, there seems to be this symbiotic relationship between teams that run it well and play good defense.
Yeah.
And I just refuse to think that if we're 104 years into the NFL or whatever we are, that if that has been the case most of the time, that there isn't some causation there, not just correlation, right? Why is it that happens? I don't think it's something we fully understand. Some of it clearly, I think, is the drives tend to be longer in terms of real time.
Yeah.
And you wind up on the field less and you're fresher and you can play better. So there's like some of that just like sheer physical conditioning element to it. Some of it is probably a mindset element of like, we're a tough running football team. And like, so defensively, like we got to be a tough-minded, whatever. There's a pressure element to it of like, you know, hey, we're not going to be this big explosive offense. We got to bear down. Our job is a little bit harder. Whatever litany of factors that I just listed and the ones that I didn't that we could hypothesize on forever. Like, I do wonder also if Ron, as both a defensive coach by trade, by nature, and as a head coach with a defense that is struggling, is also like, hey, I know what could fix this. Let's try to be a little bit more run heavy. I think it's better for our quarterback. I think it's better for us in general.
Yeah, I will say there's a benefit to slowing the game down. And you know, I've coached high school, and you know, we want to throw the ball over the yard. We got a quarterback who's pretty good, but it stresses you out. It stresses the team out in a way that isn't good. So sometimes like taking not the full 40 seconds, but taking some time on the play call, letting the offense kind of marinate. It just helps the defense be fresher. And I think there's an urgency the defense gets too that is nice to see. So whatever that thing is, I do think there is some truth to it. So I think there is a benefit, especially in a game like this, where if you can slow the game down and you can manage explosives of the opposing team, which it appears that they should be able to do that. You know, and one of the elements of doing that is running the football. And again, like I think Sam's done a great job. I think the O-line's playing better than people think. I think there's a lot of positives to take from the offense, but I do think there's a benefit to just balancing out a little bit. And I'm not saying be 50-50 in today's game. I'm saying if you could even get in like, you know, that 32% range, which is kind of middle of the pack, I think that would be really helpful. And I also think it's important for people and us to remember too that there are different ways to run the football, quote unquote, like with you know, screens and quick game and all those kind of
extension of not like it's almost like you want to say we have drop back pass and other.
Yeah,
And like
right.
your other pile needs to grow. It doesn't necessarily have to be runs. I do think that the benefit of just a simple handoff, though,
It's
like
huge.
There is stuff a quarterback has to do on that. Like
Yeah.
we had Jason Campbell on the radio show, the Hoffman show a couple weeks ago, and I asked him like how easy is it? He's like, well, like you're still like obviously you got to check pre-snap, and you know when you go that handoff, you want to like go back and see how the defense reacted. Like you take a mental picture. Like it's not like it's mindless, but it's a lot less intense mentally than it is to sit back there, feel the pressure of a rush, have to make a decision and read a defense and decide where the football goes and deliver it accurately as a 300-pound man tries to put his helmet through your chest.
Right. And I think to your point, we've talked about this before, it's not your decision. You're not making a decision. You've handed the football off. Done. In terms of mental load, it's so much easier than opposed to say, hey, all right, so what do I got on this play? It's a 5-step drop. I got to read the, if it's two safety, I'm reading this side. If it's single high, I'm reading over here. Oh, if I don't like this matchup, I actually got to check it. The process of a pass play in the NFL is not just like, oh, let's go out and find my best guy and throw it to him. No, it's way more complicated and nuanced. So I think over the course of a game, just de-leveraging guys is really helpful.
Especially young quarterback.
100%. And we've talked about that a ton, and I know that's intuitively obvious. So I think that they are efficient offensively right now. And when you look at it, the numbers, I think they all support that. I do think there are advantages, again, just to kind of taking some of that off. Take a little of the edge off.
Well, and also, how do you get rid of the inefficiency when the biggest inefficiency is sacks and turnovers?
Yeah.
You take some of those plays away where you could have sacks and turnovers.
Right. And it's not like running is the most efficient thing of all time. We're not saying that either. Like we understand that, you could have a whole bunch of neutral runs, and that's, been a characteristic of this team in the first half especially is a lot of neutral or kind of, 2-yard run kind of deal.
Yeah.
And that's not great either. We're there, but I think the advantages of kind of taking some of that off the quarterback are big. And I also think, throwing in some runs on third down is a big deal. Like if you look at the Bears, they were able to do some of that with draws and traps and things like that. So I think there are advantages there that would be very helpful.
Without question. All right, it's Take Command pregame show live here on a Burgundy and Gold game day. 106.7 The Fan, the Team 980, both stations' YouTube pages, both stations streaming live on the Odyssey app. At this point, Logan, if people can't find us, it's really on them. Although if you're hearing my voice right now, you've already done that, so that's nice. When we get back, the Sports Junkies, who are, by the way, in many of those same places, 6 to 10 a.m. on every single weekday morning, will join us with their thoughts on the game. We got a new segment to debut coming up in the next hour as well. Pretty pumped about that. It is the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. Hour 2 of the Take Command pregame show, where the doors are open here at Tap Sports Bar. MGM National Harbor. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen with you. Coming up in a half an hour, we'll take a look around the rest of the NFL, get you set for the full Sunday slate. Tail of the tape, take a look at, I think we'll take a look at probably some of the defensive explosive plays coming up at 11:15. One last look at them. We just a final flush of the system on how the defense can get it together in that department coming up in about 10 minutes. Right now, though, 11 a.m., we always check in with the Sports Junkies. Today, no exception, so we send it to JP and the boys for their thoughts on Commanders and Falcons.
All right, boys. Commanders have now lost 3 in a row, embarrassed by the Bears on Thursday night. Can they get right against this Falcons team that's off to a 3-2 start?
Personally, I don't think so. The Falcons are not a high-octane team, but I don't think that matters when you're facing this Commanders' wounded defense that in the last 4 games has allowed 33, 37, 34, and 40 points. I think this is a get-right game for the Falcons' pass rush. And I think their offense is going to be able to do kind of whatever they want against
what pass rush, Cakes? They have 5 sacks in 5 games.
Yeah.
There's always a pass rush against this team.
We said the same thing when the Bears came to town. And the Bears were throttling Sam Howell in that game. So I just expect them to get right against this Commanders
just not giving him
offensive
any
line.
He dropped back 55 straight times, Cakes, because they were behind.
You're
I
not
don't think
giving
the
him
line
enough,
was
I think,
that bad.
professional respect. Like, they've been embarrassed, right? 3 or 4 of the last weeks or whatever. The Philly game was a bright spot, even though they lost with the effort. I think we're going to get that kind of effort from this team. You're never as bad as you appear in your worst losses or as good as you appear maybe in some of your better wins. They're obviously not an elite team, but I don't think they're one of the worst teams in football, and that's kind of how they played the last few weeks. I think a lot of guys are playing for their jobs. I think the coaches are tired of being disrespected. The players are tired of being disrespected. And I expect to see one of their best efforts.
And, Jason, you talked a lot this week about Jack Del Rio. His defenses here in Washington, they've gotten better as the season progresses. It's been a rough start, but none of us could have imagined this defense being this bad. There's too much talent.
He's got to hope that we see adjustments from this team, this defense, this week. I kind of agree with Cakes. I just think that the Falcons will be able to do some things against this defense. I don't think they're just going to completely flip the script and become a top 5 defense this week. Just speaking of Del Rio, he's been a defensive coordinator for 8 years, all right? Obviously the last 4 here in Washington, but he's been a defensive coordinator for 8 years. In 5 of those 8, he had top 5 defenses. Now this year, probably not going to have a top 5 defense, but they've got to do something to get after the quarterback, get after Ritter. And I was talking about this week. For some reason, Atlanta has a slight home field advantage. They've won 9 of the last 12 in that arena, and I don't know if it's because of the crowd or if it's because they kind of lull you to sleep with the way they play, but they're much different at home than they are on the road.
I think Desmond Ridder is very mediocre, but if he gets the ball in the hands of Bijan Robinson, Pitts, who's starting to round into form health-wise, Jonnu Smith has been a nice piece added to that offense, and Drake London, I think, is going to abuse, especially if you put Manny Forbes on him one-on-one. I think he's going to torch him in this game because, we saw Forbes get benched in the last game because he couldn't handle DJ Moore, and he was awful against A.J. Brown. You got another big physical receiver to deal with.
I think what they'll do is they'll help Forbes. They'll put it in more zones. They'll help over the top. Now, they do have some issues at safety with, like, Derek Forrest being out, Jeremy Reeves on the special teams. That'll hurt them. But, again, I think there's sort of like in professional integrity is on the line here. And I think Atlanta's fairly one-dimensional. It sounds cliche, but I would stack the box and I would force Ritter to beat you. And if he does, then credit to him.
He is very mediocre. He's coming off his best game. But this is a team that actually scores less than the Commanders in the first half. The Commanders have only been averaging 8.8 points per game in the first half. The Falcons are less, right around 5 points per game. I think that gives Eric Bieniemy, and I'm sure Ron Rivera's been talking to him, the opportunity to be more balanced. The most balanced game they had, especially in the first half, in terms of pass-to-run ratio, was the Eagles game. And yes, they lost that game, but they played well. I think the Commanders get the win in Atlanta. I'll go 23-20 Commanders in a close game.
I'll take the Commanders 24-17. I think it will be tough. I think it'll be a war, but I think the better team is going to win.
I think the defense for the Commanders continues to hemorrhage. The Falcons score their biggest amount this season, 31-20. They win on their home field.
22-21. Arthur Smith.
So that's a split.
The Atlanta Falcons.
That is a split right here with the Junkies. Back to you guys.
All right, thank you very much, JP. All right, so the Junks a little more. I feel like typically they do the thing that I feel like I do emotionally and that most fans do, which is by the time you get to the end of the week, you've convinced yourself that everything's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Some pessimism there, split amongst the Junks. But we wanted to actually talk about one of the things they brought up, which is what do you do with Emmanuel Forbes this week? You have injuries in the secondary. Quan Martin's going to have to play.
Yeah.
Percy Butler's going to have to play more. Forbes was already kind of on the hot seat, got benched last week. How does the substitutions in the youth that is now injected into the Commander secondary by necessity because of the injuries affect the decision potentially of how much you stick with Emmanuel Forbes and have all of these young guys out there together?
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. You know, this is one of those things that I really enjoy about the NFL is when there is an injury, which however tragic and disappointing that is for the individual that's injured, is, you know, guys get to play football. And I want to see what Quan Martin looks like. I was very high on him coming out of college. I thought he was a very good football player. He did some really good stuff in training camp. And can he settle in and be a productive player in his rotational snaps? You know, Percy Butler's a guy that, you know, I've told you, we've talked about him a lot. I'm really high on. I want to see him play more, and especially coming off a kind of a rough game. How does he respond? Because he does some really, really positive things. So to me, it's just a bunch of guys who have a lot of upside that are very physically gifted in a way that, you know, you're physically gifted by NFL standards, you know. So I want to see, I'm about seeing those kind of physical freak guys play more and get more opportunities and see if they can do it. And so are there going to be lumps and issues and communication issues and technique issues? I think so. But I also think that, you know, this is where Jack Del Rio gets paid money to kind of find what situations and what packages suit these individuals the best. You know, does Quan need to be out there with Cam, and does Percy need to be in a specific role? And, you know, if Forbes is out there, what kind of matchup are we looking for him? Because, you know, like the Junkies alluded to, there are some big, really big, like not even just like big, like very big physical receivers on the other side of the ball. Matt Collins, 6'4", he looks like he's about 225, 230. Drake London is a big basketball suddenness type of guy who's great in terms of physicality at the catch point. In some ways, I feel like this is if Emmanuel were to play, I feel like this is a very low-risk game for him to play. Because one of the things you saw from, you know, his last couple outings is his over-aggressiveness, right? His ability to kind of say, I need to make a play, I need to jump this double move or whatever I'm doing. And, you know, I think Drake London's a very good football player. I think Matt Collins is a very good football player. They lack that kind of explosiveness that A.J. Brown and DJ Moore have.
Right.
So if you're going to put him back in, maybe this is a good game for it because you're going to kind of get the top-end speed of the opponent. Forbes now can lean into his skill set, which is that 4-3. So maybe this is a game we say, hey, man, this is one for you to get back on track.
We'll see. We'll talk more about that next. Breaking news, though, Charles Leno is out today.
Oh, all right.
Non-injury related personal, so certainly hope everything's okay for
seriously, wow.
Charles and his family or whoever, whatever it is that's causing him to miss this game. But that is obviously a big deal. Commander starting left tackle Charles Leno out today. We'll get more into that as the show goes. Cornelius Lucas, very capable backup. Will start, but you're obviously going to be thinner at tackle. I don't remember the rules in terms of when the deadline is to be able to call someone up from the practice squad. So Trent Scott would be that next guy off the practice squad, but who knows? Obviously, Sam Cosmi has played tackle, so if you get into bad way today, you probably kick him outside and go from there. So we will have the inactive list coming up in about 18 minutes. We will take a look at that and see what the plan is for the Commanders today. So that is the breaking news. Charles Leno downgraded to out for today's game. Some non-injury related personal is the designation. And yeah, that is that. But we'll go back to the secondary next. How can they wrap up these big plays? What does do your job mean? How can they do their jobs better? We will discuss next. It is the Take Command pregame show here on a Burgundy and Gold game day.
This is a team that plays hard. They play physical. They play tough. So, you know, all this talk about, you know, guys not being ready or guys not wanting it, like, this is a game where you shut people up about that. If you come out and you say, this team is trying to be physical, they're trying to punch us in the mouth, and it's not just the O-line's punching people in the mouth. Algiers runs maybe the hardest running back in the NFL. He runs hard. You know, they have a fullback, Kendall Smith. Like, he's an excellent blocker. He's an excellent pass catcher. They got big receivers who block. You know, like, they are going to come after you, and they are going to draw. Like, Jonnu Smith is one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL from, like, a physicality standpoint. So they're going to draw a line in the sand, and they're going to say, are you going to step to this? Or are you going to back up? And I really think if fans say that this isn't important, they don't care about this team doesn't care, like, this is going to be a really good litmus test for that, because it's going to be a physical, tough matchup, and it's going to feel like a very traditional football game. And what I mean by that is something from like the late 90s, early 2000s, where it's like, we're gonna do what we do, you're gonna do what you do, and let's see what happens. So I think that I'm kind of excited for that matchup, because I think it's going to help kind of inform like where this defense is at. Someone came to me in our stats department and said, hey, Logan, do you know you have the most fumble recoveries from your own team of anybody in the division? I said, that's a weird statistic. But it wasn't like I was trying to go out and recover all these fumbles. Like, my mindset was just like, you know, I'm not a good football player. Like, I'm well aware of that. Like, it was just play as hard as you can for as long as you can was really my philosophy. And so you're around the ball, you're blocking somebody, you're around the pile, I'm in the shot, and the ball pops down. It's like, oh, I'm just going to jump on that because it's right there. And so it can lead to good things, very productive things. And I think I had four fumble recoveries that year, just being near the pile, you know. And I think that, you know, effort in that context is never a negative. And I think that's something, you know, guys need to be fresher, guys need to be healthier, whatever it is. Like, all those things are important, but that's something against this Falcons team, because of how they play offensively, because of how they play defensively, I think we're going to need to see a little bit more of it. And I fully expect to. I fully expect to see that today.
Take Command pregame show live on a Burgundy and Gold game day. Logan Paulsen there, Craig Hoffman here. We just actually learned in the commercial break why Charles Leno is out, and some folks were asking in the chats, etc. So I'll share this quickly, and there's no easy transition to it, and there will be no easy transition out of it. But there was this great video, Logan, a couple weeks ago where they surprised Charles Leno after practice, and his wife told him that they were pregnant. And that magical moment, unfortunately, has ended with the tragic loss early of their child. So that is why Charles Leno is out today. Jen, his wife, lost their baby. It is something that, unfortunately, is far, far too common. And a lot of people around the country, around the world, have to go through. So our hearts and thoughts certainly go out to the Leno family. And a football game is the farthest thing from what Charles needs to be doing today. So we certainly hope the best for them, and they get the support they need during what is just a terrible, terrible time for Jen and Charles. So our absolute best go out to them. That is what happened. That is why Charles Leno is very, very understandably, beyond understandably, out today. So that is the terrible, tragic, full news report on that. We continue forward, though, with previewing the game. It obviously will continue without Charles. So when we look at the tail of the tape, which is what we do each week at this time, Logan, we're going to look at the explosive plays that this Commanders defense gave up to the Bears. It has been a bugaboo for them the entire year. Their bad stretch against the Broncos, big, gigantic plays. The Eagles, big, gigantic plays. And each play always has its own story as to what happened. But I think against the Bears, you see some more common threads through them that maybe you look at if you're Jack and you're like, all right, if we can fix this, we can rein these big plays in and ultimately get this under control. And then the good snaps that we're having will mean something as opposed to just being thrown by the wayside.
Yeah, I think, looking at some of the stuff they did in terms of defensively, like let's just take the Benjamin St. Juste play because we were talking about that earlier.
Yep.
He talked about that on John Keim's podcast, and we talked about it on our podcast. And I think you get a guy who was, seemingly in his comments is very well aware that he's not playing the correct technique. He's not playing the defense the way it's supposed to be played. So what I mean by that is, he's at the line of scrimmage, he's pressing him, he's in a pretty good relationship. Moore kind of fakes the dig, and Benjamin St. Juste bites. But in that coverage, you have help inside, right? In the pre-snap rotation, Cam Curl's rotating down in the box. That's his ball to defend. That's not your ball to defend anymore. Even though it's like man-to-man coverage, you're going to track that from outside in and let Cam kind of try to break that ball up. And if the ball is completed in that look, you did what you're supposed to do, and that's an A+ for the offense. So I think when you look at the mistakes that were made in that game, and Ron has said it a bunch, like do your job, play the technique we want you to play. He said that in the context of Emmanuel Forbes quite a bit. I think that's kind of what you're seeing is guys, and it's such a small thing. I think that's what fans are maybe having a hard time with. But in the NFL, like the margin for error is basically zero. So if you're not doing what you're supposed to do from a technique standpoint, you're not putting yourself in the best position to be successful. You're not putting the defense in the best position to be successful. And you see these explosive plays, which is one of the reasons why I think this extended this 10-day period is a good opportunity to say, hey, guys, like this is what we're going to do. We're going to get back to basics. We're going to simplify what we're doing. We're going to make sure you're all very clear on what's happening. Because I think ultimately, like as much as we want to kind of get in and piece apart all these different plays, it's just guys not doing what they're supposed to do. And that's really hard to manage as a fan and as a coach, I think, because I'm sure, like, for example, on the Percy Butler one, let's take that one for example.
So this is the same drive, first drive of the game. They give up the big explosive play to get in the strike zone. It's now 3rd and 14 from, like, the 20, 21-yard line.
Yep.
Commanders are in a cover 2 situation, and
they're in a cover 2 situation, and obviously they're in a 3-by-2. It's an empty formation, so there's 3 receivers to the left. They got speed. They got Mooney and DJ Moore kind of in the slot. Mooney is trying to beat Cody Barton over the top, and DJ Moore is kind of working for width up the sideline. And based on what I understand from talking with Coach Rivera and some other coaches around the league who do a lot of Tampa 2 stuff, it's like you want to get to like +2 from the numbers and kind of sit there with your shoulders nice and square, hang out in that position, and then you can make a play on both because you're fast and you're explosive. So that's a small thing because, Percy's shading toward the weakness in the coverage, in my opinion, which is the Mike linebacker carrying a receiver. But you don't need to tip that off. You can kind of be in between both, and I think that's kind of, again, it's a small thing. It's a basic thing that needs to be played better. And, you talk about the call, you talk about all this stuff. Like, I don't really care. I don't really care, because if you're not doing it correctly, then you're not
doesn't
putting
matter.
You're not
Like,
putting the defense in the best position to be successful.
And this is though where I think like it's worth mentioning, like, that is a very player mentality.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I just got to do it right, and it's like, yeah, I'm not a player though.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah.
You played in the NFL for 10 years. I did not. But I look at it more universally. What is each person in the line of impact here doing to maximize their chances of success, right? So, like, did the GM draft a good player? Like, that's a macro thing that we're probably not going to talk about right now.
Wow, yeah.
But when you get down to, like, the coaching level, what was the call? Was it something that made sense in that situation? I don't love that cover 2 call on a 3rd and 14. I'd prefer a quarters look where we're kind of playing
Some of the people I talked to your point, said, "Oh, why don't we run a big run here? Look at this." They ran why don't you run a cover 2 carry, which, again, you get the cover 2 structure, you get that conservative coverage structure, you get the Mike carrying the seam. But in carry, that guy's going to feather off a little bit deeper.
So Kendall Fuller, the outside corner.
Yeah, would feather deep. Because if you're playing like cover 2 catch, which looked like what they were in, like, you're not supposed to get deep, because, like, that's your zone under there. So to your point, like, is that the best call for that situation?
Probably not.
You talk to different coordinators, they say, I don't like that call. Some people say, I love that call. We just got to run it right. Whatever it is, but I think there is
right.
You are standing on a good argument there. Are you maximizing that moment in the game with that call?
And it's like you're 3rd and 14. Just don't give up. At least don't give up a touchdown. Please don't give up a first down. It's 3rd and 14. Why are you running a coverage that's weaknesses 14 to 18 yards on the sideline?
Yeah.
Like, that does seem to be a technical schematic miscalculation. So that is part of it. But to your point, if the player plays it right, then it doesn't matter, because that weakness is actually not there to any significant way, because you have a guy who runs a 4-3 and Percy Butler there to shut, like, hey, go ahead, try to throw it. Just kidding, never mind.
Right. No, and I think, and even to your point, even more of a bigger picture, right? Kind of to this point we're kind of digging at right now, is that is still a tough look for Percy. You have their number 1 receiver running for width away from the safety, and you have your middle linebacker in a bad look. So either one of those throws, if I'm the defensive coordinator, I'm not like, yay, love both that, right? So, again, can you maximize that situation? And, I think what do you say, 14 to 18 yards? I think that sounds about right in terms of the whole shot window, right? It might be 15 to 19. I don't know exactly. They have a number. There's a book out, and you can read, like, the holes.
And it depends on every play, how deep the guy drops,
Sure, 100%,
all that stuff.
100%. So I do think there is merit to that. I think there's a little bit of both. I think if the call is different, maybe you're in a better situation. If the
everybody can do better.
100%. And I think, but what I would focus on here is that when fans, I think, get frustrated when they hear Ron or Jack say they got to play the correct technique, and in this situation, on the first play with Benjamin St. Jude, they both need to play better technique.
Yes,
they both. That's like unequivocally a fact. Now that that's established, is there a way where you say?
Well, and it's also let's say they run. I'm saying like run quarters. They run a deeper version of cover 2.
Yeah.
If you run that poorly, it's still a touchdown.
Yeah.
So like you still, no matter what you call, you have to execute it correctly. And to me, that speaks to something that we've talked about at length with our podcast. We don't really have time to get into it again here. Because this is a radio show with commercial breaks and actual time constraints, unlike our podcast, which you can listen to 3 times a week anywhere you get your podcast. But the idea of, like, do these guys understand on, like, a fundamental level what their job even is so that they can do it, right? And that, to me, comes down to how good of a teacher are you. It's something that I talked about on the radio show with Tiki Barber on Friday. I said, hey, when you were playing rosters, and this is to an extent true for you as well, although you kind of, your career spanned this transition with the CBA, where rosters get younger. There used to be more veterans. Guys had more institutional knowledge and know-how. With a younger league now, because the rookie contracts are so outrageously affordable, you need better teachers. And I just don't know if this staff has proven that they've got that teaching acumen to get the fundamental, like, granular understanding of not only this is what you're doing, but why, so that you eliminate certain mistakes.
And we don't know. Like, there's no way for us to know that. Because, again, like, there's a big again, I just look at some of the mistakes, and so, like, Percy Butler's mistake, for example. Like, I like Percy. I think he's a good football player. I have high expectations for him. That mistake is, like, kind of day one install-y, you know, for, like, safeties. And so I don't think that's on the coaches necessarily. It might be. But
Yeah.
I think just reiterating some of these points and making the guys aware of them. Like there's guys that I've coached, and you
Yeah.
could tell them the same thing 100 times, and they're going to mess it up 100 times.
Well, I would say as a coach at that point, that's on you because
Yeah.
if you've told them the same thing 100 times and you haven't found a way to say it differently or teach it differently to get through to them, just if you don't get it and I just tell you the same thing, why is it on you?
And I think that's what I'm saying is like you're kind of going as a coach, you're going through an exploration of what speaks to this guy. And if you think about it, we're still relatively new with some of these players, with these coaches. There's new coaches and new roles, and learning how to speak to those guys and the best way to teach that information. So I do think there's a lot to that. There's a lot to this idea that even though like these coaches could be doing a good job, the players could be doing the best they can, but there's still a gap in terms of learning and teaching in terms of different philosophies. So it doesn't. It's one of those things that hypothetically, and again, it could be one. Hypothetically, it could be one's terrible and one's really good, or vice versa. But also, hypothetically, there's still this area of gray where they're learning how to best maximize each player and each coaching point.
And that's the last thing I'll say real quick is what works for one player might not work for another. You might have taught Cam Curl excellently because your teaching style and Cam Curl's learning style are compatible.
Right.
And Percy Butler's like, I'm lost.
Yeah.
And so we will obviously see how Percy Butler specifically does today as a starter. Derek Forrest on IR, Jeremy Reeves on IR. So it'll be Butler and Curl, the starting safeties today for the Commanders. How will they fill out some of the rest of the injuries? Who's officially back? Who is out? We will get you the full injury report next and go around the NFL on the Take Command pregame show.
And I think the other thing about knowing and doing your job is there needs to be a level of communication. Like that's one thing when I talked to Fred about when he played with Sean Taylor and LaRon and, D'Angelo or whoever the other corner was, like one of the things that they did a good job of is communicate those situations. It's like we're coming out of the huddle, we're walking the line of scrimmage, and Cam would go, hey, or Smoot would go, hey, man, remember, I'm by myself here. Or Sean would be like, hey, you're by yourself. I got to help over here on the 3-by. And it just, that stuff is so powerful. And it takes ownership of a whole group to get there. So there are layers to this. There are things that can be done differently. And I don't think we're trying to assign blame here. We're kind of reasons and like with an onion, right? You pull back the first layer. People say, oh, St. Juice is playing bad. And it's like, well, he's playing hard, but is he playing bad because he doesn't know what to do or whatever it is? There's a level here. And I think
the way I've phrased it for the last week is like we're on a quest for answers. But what do you see defensively from Atlanta? It was, I think, a bit of a different look than anything Washington's seen this year.
Yes, this was a really interesting film study because you're watching the film and you're like, I know this defense. Like, I know it. I can't pinpoint exactly. Like, the coverages aren't the same. And then I was like, what's going on here? So I looked it up, and the defensive coordinator was the D-line coach in New Orleans. And when I read that, I was like, oh, that makes 100% sense. Like, they play a New Orleans style of football, a New Orleans defensive style of football. And what I mean by that is they are fast and they are physical. They're not overly complicated. They don't bring a ton of pressure, but they're good at what they do. They don't mess around. They play hard in a way that is unique to that system. Like, talk about guys that know exactly what they're supposed to do. Well, you can tell they know exactly what they're supposed to do. This is maybe the most important thing about the Falcons, if there's all this information we just dropped, is Houston was never able to change the game flow. And what I mean by that is they were never able to put them in a situation where they're down 2 scores and they needed to stop running the ball. So they were able to run the ball for all 4 quarters, even though it wasn't the most efficient thing ever. and they were able to kind of stay within in the pocket of what they wanted to be from a play action standpoint, which again makes easier throws and easier opportunities for Desmond Ridder. Like that is what this offense is, and it goes as Desmond Ridder goes. So if you can confuse him, if you can disguise stuff, if you can put him under pressure, like you're gonna have an awesome day.
You're up.
Welcome back. It is the Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day. Is that Hopkins?
No, that's
Moore. A little bit of scary scene there. That was a big old hit. Watching the London game, which we'll get your score on in a second. We'll go around the NFL too. It's the Take Command pregame show here on burgundy and gold game day. On your radio on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. On YouTube at 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980, where if people are watching, no, I didn't get taller. I'm just standing up because my legs are sore.
Yeah. No,
that's
you
what's
went
happening
for a run
there.
Yesterday.
Yes, I did. I ran for a very, very long
That's
time.
A rough hit.
Yeah,
Jeez.
that is a potentially ejectable hit. We can't be launching with the helmet. That is Ravens. Oh, God, yeah, that's ejectable. Goodbye. See ya. Kyle Hamilton, I think, is 14. Yeah. He should get tossed out of that game. A game in which his team is leading 18-6. Ryan Clary back in studio. Let's go ahead and punch up that music and get going here as we take you around the NFL. We bring the pick 6 from the Hoffman show to the Take Command pregame show next. 6 players that we think will be essential for Commanders' victory. So we'll do that coming up in about 10 minutes, Logan. But let's dive into it. The rest of the games today, Vikings and Bears. When we did our game picks on Friday's show, I have no idea what to do with this game.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, obviously Justin Jefferson's out. It feels like the Bears are kind of finding it. Where's the game at? Let's do that.
It's in Chicago.
I'm going to say Chicago's going to win that game. Just because I think like they kind of got a little momentum. They're playing a good brand of football. They're explosive, and I just feel like so much of that offense goes through Justin Jefferson. I don't think that's flying for the Vikings.
Yeah, and I think the Bears have actually legitimately found something.
I think so too.
Maybe that's wishful thinking to hope that the Commanders' loss won't look as bad in a couple of weeks. But I think the Bears have found some things offensively. They realize if they take some shots, they can hit them. I'll take the Bears at home. Seahawks and Bengals. Did Cincinnati find it last week, or will Seattle bring them back down to where they were previously?
It looked like it, but the thing I'm excited in that game is Witherspoon, the young corner from Illinois. It looks like he's that dude, and I think he'll probably draw a matchup with, Jamar Chase. So that's something I think will be really interesting. And if you can contain Jamar Chase, I think you contain that offense. So while I think Joe Burrow is healthy and I think lots of things are going well, I would probably say I think they've turned a corner. I'm going to say Cincinnati was.
Yeah, Cincinnati's at home. That's who I took as well. Niners and Browns. No Deshaun Watson. This is the kind of game that on the shows on Friday we just go 1, 2, 3 Niners.
I'm with it.
Not much to talk about here.
This game I think would have been awesome if Deshaun had been playing, because that offense for the Browns looks like it's progressing. And the thing that is interesting about that whole storyline is what is going on with Deshaun. He's been medically cleared, not playing. Obviously, there's a difference between playing football and being medically cleared.
It sounds like structurally he's fine, but he can't drive the ball.
Yeah,
he's still in too much pain in the shoulder to really be able to unleash it the way he wants.
Yeah, and so obviously that would have been awesome to see them play and see them go, because again the thing that the biggest difference about the Browns this year is that defense, and that defense is playing really, really good football. I don't think it's going to matter because you're going to have P.J. Walker playing quarterback, so tough game.
I do love the quotes about P.J. Oh, he's a dog. We really love him. Don't be surprised if he plays well. And it's like, look, P.J. Walker's been a good backup in this league for a while now. He's won some games. In Carolina, you actually wondered last year, is like, I don't know, do they keep him around to compete and maybe even start with a high draft pick, let that guy ride the bench a couple weeks and to get a feel. They let him go. He's in Cleveland. And now he's starting. By the way, the Titans just scored. Kyle Hamilton was ejected for the Ravens.
that was a
so
tough hit.
now 18-13, the score in the London game. Panthers and Dolphins, speaking of P.J. Walker's former home.
Kind of
1, 2, 3 Dolphins.
yeah.
Okay, Colts and Jags. This is a
like
fun
this
one. Gardner Minshew revenge game.
Yeah.
Minshew starting for the Colts with Anthony Richardson going on IR. This game in Jacksonville where the Colts haven't won since like the Willard Fillmore administration. It has been forever.
Yeah, for me, every time that Richardson doesn't play, I'm less engaged with it, and I'm so bummed because he was looking so good. Obviously, might get season-ending shoulder surgery, but obviously, Gardner Minshew, really exciting football player. Matchup that I think is really compelling in that is Blake Freeland from BYU, the third-round tackle, will be starting for the Colts, going up against former first-round pick. What's his name?
Josh Allen?
No, the
Trayvon
Walker. There we
Trayvon
go.
Walker, yeah.
So that'll be really interesting to see how that matchup goes.
The other former first-round pick.
Yeah. And so I think Jacksonville's too good. I think Jacksonville's going to win that game.
I do as well. Saints and Texans, sneaky fun game here.
Sneaky fun game. Yeah, really excited to see that. Obviously, Stroud playing good football. That Saints defense has been awesome the last couple of weeks. Big old shutout up against New England. So really cool, really interesting to see what old Bobby Slowick. You remember Bobby Slowick? He was here when you were covering the team, right?
I think he had left already. But.
Yeah, but he's a former on that former Washington staff. Yeah. That is just kind of seeming to proliferate the NFL. He's the OC for the Texans. Hopefully, comes up with a good game plan for that vaunted Saints defense.
Yeah, we'll see. C.J. Stroud, no interceptions in his career so far. See if the first one comes against the Saints team that's pretty good at generating turnovers. In the absolutely gross avert your eyes game of the week, the Patriots and Raiders. Josh McDaniels versus former boss who's on whatever the opposite of a heater is. The worst loss of Belichick's career 2 years ago, a 35-point defeat, followed it up by losing 34-0.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting one here is if they lose to the Raiders, is Belichick out? Like, are you having a conversation about having to replace him at the end of the year? It feels like that's the way this is going. Poor Max Crosby playing good football. Poor Devontae Adams playing good football on kind of a bad football team. I think the Raiders are a better football team than people think, and they were going to win some games. I don't know what's going on with the Patriots.
That is the history of Josh McDaniels, though, as a head coach. Which is hilarious because when he's an OC with Belichick, they both succeed. And then when he leaves, like McDaniels has always had talent, and it's something about when he's your head coach, it just doesn't click. I think I picked the Raiders, but I'm
picking the Raiders.
Cardinals Rams,
kind of a fun game.
Yeah, low key, super fun game. Obviously a big test for this Arizona team, who's been competitive in basically every game this season. Has the upset win over the Cowboys on their resume, but the Rams offensively. It's like, oh, yeah, Sean McVay is good at this offense thing.
Oh, gosh, so good. Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp's back.
Yeah.
They've got legs there. The Cardinals are so fun because they've got all these kind of cool playmakers. I love overachieving teams, and I feel like both these teams are overachieving. Matthew Stafford appears to be playing the best football of his career, which is crazy because they're 2-3, but I'm going to go the Rams here, but hopefully it'll be a fun, competitive football game with kind of some wacky bits.
Yeah, Stafford, if he can not turn it over, they're fine. He's thrown for 1,500 yards this year almost, 1,451 already, but he's got 5 touchdowns, 5 picks. So can you be a little more efficient in the turnover department? Eagles and Jets at MetLife Stadium. This is, to me, it's kind of a 1-2-3 Philly game.
I was just about to say this feels like it could be a little bit of an upset alert for the Jets. Their defense is playing so well. This Philadelphia offense doesn't run away with games the same way. So maybe if they can keep it close, hit a couple explosives. I think you're right. I think the Eagles win, but they might cover. I don't know.
They haven't quite. It's funny because do you listen to New Heights, the Kelsey Brothers podcast?
A little bit, yeah.
You would enjoy it. It's really good.
Yeah, I listen to bits the stuff on YouTube or Instagram.
They do a lot of they do a lot of clipping.
Yeah,
it's great. Excellent staff they've got there at New Heights. But I've actually gotten to listen to the full podcast, and it's been interesting listening to both Travis and Jason talk about how they really wish their offenses could just score touchdowns. Like both teams that are kind of seen as these offensive juggernauts, their defenses are playing so well in Kansas City and Philly.
Yeah.
And they're 4-1 and 5-0, now 5-1 and 5-0 because the Chiefs won on Thursday, despite the fact that their offenses haven't really clicked yet.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, and we'll see how that Philly offense gets going today. Lions and Bucks might be the best game of the day. Both these teams are fun, man.
Yeah, they're fun teams. I think the Lions are a legitimate, like, good football team. I think they win this game. I think the Buccaneers, there's a little bit of, I don't want to say imposter syndrome, but it doesn't feel quite as sharp or as clean as what the Lions are doing. And the Lions just got so many, like, playmakers. They got excellent playmakers at running back. The tight end, Laporta's doing a great job. Goff's playing great football.
Yeah.
The defense is physical, tough. Aiden Hutchinson. It just feels like that group is ready for something more than the Bucs are, but hoping for a competitive football game for sure.
Yeah, I do think that Jahmyr Gibbs is out today. So
who's the starter though? Montgomery.
Montgomery, and it's funny every time they rule a running back out. My guy Field Yates at ESPN is like, "Oh, yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs is out. David Montgomery's in line for 52 carries today."
Yeah, right.
Because they do like to run it, as explosive as they are.
You know, it's interesting. I think the Lions, San Francisco, all these kind of Philadelphia, these kind of elite offenses in the NFL are more run first now. And, you know, we listened to that thing on the play callers about how, you know, coverages are getting more complicated. Teams are having a hard time running against these throwing against these more complex coverage structures. I don't think it's a coincidence that these teams that are hyper committed to running the football are being more effective. So.
Yeah, you got Giants and Bills. 1, 2, 3. Bills. Cowboys and
what if they
Chargers.
won, though? What if the Giants won, though? There's no way they win, but what if they won?
Thanks for jinxing it.
Yeah.
Cowboys and Chargers. Kellen Moore Bowl. I actually kind of like the Chargers in this game.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Tell me why.
I think there's something like fundamentally wrong with the Cowboys, and it is finally starting to catch up to them. And I think that the offensive firepower that the Chargers bring is going to be enough at home to do it. I mean, they've scored. Their offense is ridiculous.
Redonk.
I mean, Herbert this year, 7 touchdowns to 1 pick.
Yeah, and they find explosive plays like out the wazoo, and they're throwing the ball over the yard. They can run the ball a little bit. Like, I don't hate that, actually, now that I'm thinking about it a little bit. And the Cowboys' defense is awesome. But, again, that offense with Mike McCarthy has been a little bit disappointing. So, yeah, maybe you're right.
All right, some of the key for fantasy purposes inactives early today. Miles Sanders out for Carolina. Roshan Johnson out in Chicago, as is Travis Homer. T. Higgins active for the Bengals. Deshaun Watson, we talked about, out for Cleveland. But P.J. Walker will have David Njoku. Robert Woods is active for Houston. Tank Dell inactive for
bummer.
Houston. Zay Jones out for Jacksonville. That's a big loss for them, but they will still have Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley. Jeff Wilson Jr., running back in Miami, is out. Devin Achane is out as well. He went on IR this week. Chase Claypool not ready to make his debut in Miami yet. And then Elijah Mitchell out for the 49ers. As for the Commanders inactives, Christian Holmes, KJ Henry, Charles Leno, Chris Paul, Curtis Hodges, and Mitchell Tinsley. And, of course, Tariq Castro-Fields called up to the active roster.
Wow.
And F.A. Obata is back this week. So all of those, your injury reports for the Commanders. The injury report is brought to you by the Centers for Advanced Orthopedics. More physicians, more locations, more advanced care centered around one thing. You visit CFAortho.com. All right, when we get back, a new segment here on the Take Command pregame show. Stay tuned. New, shiny, exciting.
But my favorite story is, I think we were playing Cincinnati. Was it Cincinnati?
That's not what depends on the story, but maybe we were playing Cincinnati.
So Logan catches this touchdown.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Cincinnati. Yep.
It was Cincinnati. So we put in this play, and it was like, I think we called it Hoss Juke or something like that. I can't remember what we called it in that offense, but Logan's on a seam, right? So he's our vertical threat, taking the top off the defense.
Digging out, guys.
We're talking in the week. I don't think we ever said it in the install with those guys, but they're like, listen, Logan's not even in the progression. He's taking the top off this thing. We're trying to work this little option route down. And they bust this coverage. And, I mean, he is screaming wide open.
I wasn't even supposed to be on the play. They were supposed to sub somebody else in because I thought I was too slow to run this route, just for the context here for everybody.
So he's screaming wide open. And I'm like, Matt, throw it at his back shoulder. You might hit him in stride. You might hit him in stride if you try and back shoulder him. Threw it right at him. He catches it. It was an awesome touchdown. Just the celebration afterwards was so much fun. For me, it was always fun celebrating the touchdowns with the guys that didn't score them all the time. You know, like
take that, Julio Jones.
Yeah, and I'm not, I'm saying that, but like your role for us was you did the dirty work, and when you see guys that do the dirty work get rewarded for it, that was really cool. Something I'll never forget. The caveman.
Yeah.
The caveman was in there in the end zone celebrating. It was awesome.
So there was this play where we call it like it was, what is it, 19 Zorro. So basically like versus a 3-4 structure with an outside linebacker who is Von Miller in this case, I would get help from the fullback, like on inside help. So I could be really aggressive on my reach, really violent to the reach. And so it's me and DY, and DY, is a physical son of a gun. And so we take Von Miller and we put him, like, no joke, in the water cooler. Like, we put him way out there on the sideline. And we were like, this guy ain't nothing. Like, we're going to, we were so fired up. And so it ended up being like a 25 or 30 yard gain. So we were all fired up. And then Kyle's like, all right, let's come back to it. So like 2 plays later, we're running again and we're running to the right. And I was like, oh man, we are about to tee this dude up real quick. Just tune him up nice and good. And so I go out to get him and I'm firing off the ball. My hat's low. I'm flat back. And I swear to God, like he was about as close as my hand was to my face. And he just disappeared into like mist. And he like swung me and I fell right on my face. And I just was like, oh my gosh. And like I went back and watched the film and it was crazy how quickly he was able to like do his little basketball weave and then like just disappear from my vision and get inside and make the tackle. And I was like, oh, so now he's upset. So then the next play, I'm like all tentative and nervous. And I felt like Vaughn did. I watched this on film, so I knew he did this. But he does a really good job of like kind of like playing it like a boxer a little bit. You know what I mean? Like kind of rope-a-doping you a little bit. So like he lets you get one, right? Where I got after him. He makes you look like an idiot. And then the next time I was super tentative on him, and he literally did like a double stick like he was going to make me miss, and then just grabbed my neck and then threw me over the pile. I was like, man, this is going to be tough. I got to like think of a plan here in the next 15 minutes so I don't look like an idiot for the rest of the game. But, when you're playing elite football players like him, like there's a reason they're elite. So if you get one on them, it's probably because they want. They probably because they're letting you get one.
It's a trap. It's a trap.
It's a trap.
Take Command pregame show here on a Burgundy and Gold game day. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen with you. So Logan, I teased we got a fancy new segment coming, and then we decided that we don't really have time to do it.
We're going to double tease it.
Yeah. So if you want the fancy new segment, a spin on our Pick 6 segment that we do on the Hoffman Show, you can wait like 20 minutes. So we'll get to it coming up at 11:15, at 25 minutes, in case anyone's driving somewhere and is like, "Oh my God, I'm late."
Yeah.
You got a little bit longer. So 12:15, we will get to that here on the Take Command pregame show. But I wanted to circle back on something that we hit in the last segment as we're flying through all the games.
Yeah.
You said something that caught my ear that I thought was interesting, and something that we've kind of talked about through the lens of the Commanders, which is a lot of the most explosive offenses in the NFL right now, point production-wise, are actually teams that we would consider to be run first.
Yeah.
So why is it that passing is the efficient thing to do? There's no doubt about that when you dive into the analytics and numbers, but teams that you look at and you be like, that is a run-first football team, are the ones that are actually scoring the points.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And, I think we haven't done a tremendous amount of study on it, you and I, but just my gut tells me is, one of the things that has made throwing the football more challenging in the NFL is these kind of pass-centric coverage structures. And what that means is instead of kind of packing the box in there with your normal +1 kind of count, like think about the old Seattle Legion of Boom Cam Chancellor in the box. Like, if you have 7 blockers, they will have 8 defenders in the box. You will not run the football. And they could get away with that. They had really good corners. They had a really simple
they also had Earl Thomas, who was like one of the ultimate erasers at safety over top.
100%. And they had guys at the linebacker position who really understood what they needed to do and where they needed to be. And it was really great. And I do think that defense kind of led into the kind of modern understanding of how to beat certain passing, how to beat coverages with passing concepts. Because I remember going to San Francisco and everything we tried to do, and even when I was about to leave here in 2016, and then when I was in Chicago for the season of 2016, everyone was talking about beating cover 3 and how to attack these spots. And so out of that comes this coverage structure where it's like you get these kind of amorphous back end coverage structures where it's like, is that quarters, is that cover 6? And you get more guys dedicated to defending the pass. So instead of playing these heavier run fronts, you get these light run structures. And as a result, it's much harder to throw the football. And I think teams have not kind of, Mike Shanahan used to say that if you want to be a running team, you have to live and die by it. You have to be really dedicated to it. And most of these offenses aren't built that way. So when you look at Kyle, when you look at the Lions, when you look at Philly, like, they are teams that run the ball. And what you do get out of that is simpler coverage structures. You get more man coverage. You get more single safety structure. And when you get more single safety structure, you get more space in the back end. And those explosive plays that people are always coveting are easier to come by when there's less coverage players in the back end, when the quarterback can identify those coverage structures. So I think that's kind of what I'd say is, like, you are, by your philosophy and approach, dictating to the back end of the defense.
Right. So the short version is, like, they made it easier to get explosive pass plays by making you defend the run.
Yeah.
And so you look at the top scoring defenses in the league through where we're at right
defenses
now, 5
or
weeks.
Offenses?
Offenses in the league. Dolphins, they lead the league in every offensive category. They're 36.2.
Kyle Shanahan run the football type of team.
They run it a ton. 49ers. The Bills are kind of a bit of an exception. Lions, Eagles. Those are your top 5.
Seattle is the next team.
Yeah,
like
Seattle
runs the ball a ton. Like, that is, I didn't even, that really supports our perspective. But those 6 of the top 5 teams are run first teams.
So here's something else that I think is interesting. Like, people think of using the pass as defending every blade, like make them defend every blade of grass. You can't actually dictate that when you pass, though. Because when you snap the ball, you don't know where the ball is going to go.
Okay.
When you run the ball and you have a good mix of inside, outside, left, right, like, you can kind of dictate, like, I'm going to make you run sideline to sideline because we're running outside zone left and we're going to come back and now we're going to run it right.
Yeah.
And, like, you jet sweep this.
Yeah.
And I think when I think of some of these offenses, especially Miami and San Francisco, which are obviously, like, brothers or first cousins or whatever you want to look at it, with McDaniel and Shanahan being at the helm and having worked together for so long, going back to their days here, like, they make you defend every blade of grass in the run game.
Yeah.
And when you think about spacing teams out, creating space for those explosive plays, especially when you have Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, like, that to me is part of this too, of almost just this. They have this feel for dragging the defense all over the place, tiring them out.
Yeah.
And I think that probably also has something to do with it. And then, we're watching this Baltimore-Tennessee game, and all of a sudden Tennessee's working their way back into it. They're starting to run the ball better. I also think teams that are dedicated to the run can just abuse you late in games.
Yeah.
Because you might have 1-2-yard carries early that turn into 9-10-yard carries late because there's a wearing effect of running the football too. And I think that is, like, I think those two factors on top of what you said from kind of the schematic structural standpoint are kind of the 3 keys to why it works so well.
Yeah, and I also think there's maybe a little bit of, this is kind of to your point, like, teams with good offenses can run the ball late in games because they're ahead, right?
There's that too.
Yeah, so I think
the numbers get skewed.
There's a little bit of skewing there, but I do think that's what I think that's a really good insight by you of kind of saying, and what I would say with Mike and with Kyle and even the Detroit offense, Philly not so much because they're so talented on the offensive line, is they scheme up run game stuff like it's the pass game. And there are a lot of teams that I've played for where the run game is like, oh, well, this is how we run Wanda, which is our weak side run away from the tight end. And we'll just run Wanda because it's a good run. And no offense to Wanda. Wanda's fine. Wanda's one of the best, most productive runs.
She's lovely.
Yeah, one of the most productive runs in the NFL. But you can make it better by when you watch Kyle, like, hey, we're going to get in a tight split with this receiver. He's going to actually crack the linebacker. The other receiver is going to come in jet sweep, and he's going to block the corner. We're going to have this nice crease because the offensive tackle doesn't actually have to get to the Mike linebacker. We can really sit on this double team. And that's where you see that kind of, when you watch Miami, that's exactly what they're doing, the attention to detail. And I think it does loosen up other stuff when it comes to the pass game, but not all staffs approach the run game with that level of detail. And I think that's something that when I look at teams around the league, I don't think it's a coincidence that they have some of the best offensive coordinators that are hyper attention detail kind of guys, because even if the coverage structure is single high and they are playing a lot of guys in the run game, they find ways, because they understand how important it is, to maximize the effectiveness of each and every run that they're calling.
Speaking of teams that run the football well, oh boy, the Atlanta Falcons. They do it quite well. What makes them so good? We will take a deeper dive into the Atlanta offense next as we get you ready for Commanders and Falcons. Then coming up at 12:15, as promised, our new segment, a spin on the Hoffman Show's Pick 6. It's okay. I talked to the host of the show. He said it's
cool. Okay?
Yeah, he's good with it. And then speaking of afternoon show host, Grant Paulsen joins us at 12:30. Denton and Linnell at 12:45 as we get you set for Commanders and Falcons here on the Take Command pregame show.
And I think the other thing about knowing and doing your job is there needs to be a level of communication. Like, that's one thing when I talked to Fred about when he played with Sean Taylor and LaRon and, D'Angelo or whoever the other corner was. Like, one of the things that they did a good job of is communicate those situations. It's like, we're coming out of the huddle, we're walking the line of scrimmage, and Cam would go, hey, or Smoot would go, hey, man, remember, I'm by myself here. Or Sean would be like, hey, you're by yourself. I got to help over here on the 3-by. And that stuff is so powerful, and it takes ownership of a whole group to get there. So there are layers to this. There are things that can be done differently. And I don't think we're trying to assign blame here. We're kind of reasons and like with an onion, right? You pull back the first layer. People say, oh, St. Juice is playing bad. And it's like, well, he's playing hard, but is he playing bad because he doesn't know what to do or whatever it is? There's a level here. And I think
the way I've phrased it for the last week is like, we're on a quest for answers. But what do you see defensively from Atlanta? It was, I think, a bit of a different look than anything Washington's seen this year.
Yes, this was a really interesting film study because you're watching the film and you're like, I know this defense. Like, I know it. I can't pinpoint exactly. Like, the coverages aren't the same. And then I was like, what's going on here? So I looked it up, and the defensive coordinator was the D-line coach in New Orleans. And when I read that, I was like, oh, that makes 100% sense. Like, they play a New Orleans style of football, a New Orleans defensive style of football. And what I mean by that is they are fast and they are physical. They're not overly complicated. They don't bring a ton of pressure, but they're good at what they do. They don't mess around. They play hard in a way that is unique to that system. Like, talk about guys that know exactly what they're supposed to do. Well, you can tell they know exactly what they're supposed to do. This is maybe the most important thing about the Falcons, if there's all this information we just dropped, is Houston was never able to change the game flow. And what I mean by that is they were never able to put them in a situation where they're down 2 scores and they needed to stop running the ball. So they were able to run the ball for all 4 quarters, even though it wasn't the most efficient thing ever. And they were able to kind of stay within in the pocket of what they wanted to be from a play action standpoint, which again makes easier throws and easier opportunities for Desmond Ridder. Like, that is what this offense is, and it goes as Desmond Ridder goes. So if you can confuse him, if you can disguise stuff, if you can put him under pressure, like, you're going to have an awesome day.
It is the Take Command pregame show live at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. Final hour of the show. Logan Paulsen there, Craig Hoffman here. All right, let's take a look at this Atlanta offense. We've talked about, obviously, this matchup a lot today, kind of through the lens of the Commanders' defense, obviously being a show that focuses on the Commanders. But if you were to scout the Atlanta offense and identify the potential problem areas and how you'd scheme it up and what you'd want them to do if you're the defensive coordinator, Jack Del Rio, how do you look at it?
Yeah, so obviously they have the reputation of being a run-first team, which they are, and I think last year they were really efficient at running the football. Like they were, I think, averaging like about 4.5, 5 yards a carry. This year, not so much. It's been a little bit up and down in terms of their consistency, and I think one of the reasons for that is something we talked about with Kevin, and that's the fact that they're not running a ton of zone read or RPO anymore. So some of those like more efficient kind of zone read, they're not running a ton of RPO. So let me just back that off. Some of the more zone read stuff they've been doing in terms of those 7-8 yard runs by the quarterback aren't in the offense as much. They still do it, but it's not a feature. So I think that's really hurt their run game efficiency. And then I think they do a pretty good job from a play action pass standpoint of finding explosives and then kind of helping kind of convolute rules for the back end. You know, they had a play against Houston Texans where they're running what I would call like a scissors concept or a dagger concept. Kind of couldn't tell which one it was, but the outside guy's kind of running a 15-yard sit to like a dig, and then the fullback is actually running a rail up the sideline. So the in cover 3, the corner matches number 1 who's running the dig, and they basically drop the rail, and it ends up being an explosive play. And I think those types of plays, you know, are stuff you see with Kyle all the time and Kyle Juszczyk, but they do have a fullback in Smith who's a pretty good football player, and they find ways to get these plays done, right? We've talked about their playmakers. Kyle Pitts is a unicorn, right? He doesn't look like he's running quite as well as he was last year, maybe still recovering from the knee injury, but still an explosive physical guy. Drake London is a guy that I think is great in one-on-one situations. Matt Collins is basically a really big and fast tight end that they have. It's playing receiver for him. And they find way, and Bijan is a guy that is special when he gets the football in his hand. So they have a lot of things at their disposal. Really, the thing, like they are so close to being San Francisco. They're right there in terms of having these playmakers. The thing that is holding them back is they don't have a person to get the football to anybody. Like we mentioned, the Desmond Ridder had one of his best games last week, and he did. He played great. They found easy throws for him. He made some big-time throws. He elevated the offense. He did some really, really good stuff. But like the weeks prior to that, very inconsistent. 2 picks, 1 pick 6 against the Jacksonville Jaguars, you know, in London, and that's kind of who he's been. Very up and down, you know, very up and down in the game against Green Bay that we watched. And I think if you can get him to be that guy as opposed to the guy that he was last week, you're going to be okay. So how do you do that? I think you got to stop the run and say, hey, Desmond, you know, execute this offense without the benefit of the misdirection, the running game, and the play action pass and the keeper game gives you. So
yeah, I think the other big difference, like stylistically, I hear what you're saying with San Francisco. It's just San Francisco has so much team speed.
They do have a lot of team speed, and they have guys that are much better. Oh, that's a great point. They do have much better guys who are much better after the catch in terms of like Deebo Samuels.
Yeah, it doesn't have that, which makes it obviously a lot easier. But they're a power team who knows who they are. I think with so you say you want Ridder to beat you, obviously.
Yeah.
And if he does, like handshake. So I actually wonder what that means for some of the Commanders from a personnel decision today. Like typically you think that means a lot more Buffalo nickel type of situations. Well, what do you do?
Buffalo or Cinco. Stuff we haven't seen a lot of this year. But
yeah, using some of your heavier personnel, but with Derek Forrest out, how much do you trust like Quan Martin to come in and be that run support player or to be deep with Cam in? First of all, like which would you do there, right?
What?
If you got Percy at one safety for sure.
Yeah.
And then you got to choose, do we pull Cam into the box or do we leave Cam in the post and have Quan play as the Buffalo nickel player? Which direction would you go / which direction do you think they go? Because both are options.
Well, they've had 10 days, so things can change. But my gut would say like he did not do a lot of post safety work. Quan did not in training camp. So I kind of want to get him in a role where he feels most comfortable, which in training camp he played nickel. And he played Buffalo nickel predominantly. He did play some safety, did play some true safety, but normally that guy was in the box. So I think in terms of his skill set, he probably is better from a skill set standpoint to play post, but they didn't play him there a ton, and he's a good physical tackler, so maybe you get him in the box and he does some of that work. But in terms of complexity, that box stuff is very, very challenging from a mental standpoint. You're in run fits, which change with motions. You're in pass coverage. So I think he'll probably play in the box if I was going to put money on it. But in 10 days, maybe they say, hey, we don't like that. Let's get Cam in the box. We feel much better about that. And you guys, the two young guys, will play the post, and we'll kind of live with any of the communication issues that stem from that. So.
That seems risky. I tend to think it's going to be in the box as well. The other guy that I wonder, and this is a crazy radio guy wondering aloud, but like, could David Mayo see the field today? Cody Barton.
Yeah.
Cody Barton is a guy that has had his struggle so far this year adapting to playing in a different system, and we were talking off air earlier, I think it was, although maybe it was the first segment of the show. They start to blend together after a while. But we were talking about how challenging it can be for a linebacker to play behind this incredibly talented defensive front where everyone thinks, oh, you got the easiest job in the world. Well, not when these guys do stuff that other linebackers don't. It's
linemen,
or linemen don't. So reading and playing off of them can become difficult. Mayo's got a little bit more experience with that. You're not as scared about him getting caught in coverage necessarily as you are on a typical week because of some of the lack of team speed that we talked about and the dedication to the run game that we talked about. I wonder if that's – you talk about the Cinco package, like does that include David Mayo as the linebacker this week in some situations? Like I think they have some options. I just wonder how creative they're going to get and how creative they even need to get.
Yeah, well, in 22 personnel, he usually will come in, David Mayo.
He hasn't played a snap defensively this year.
I think you'll see him in 22 versus this team, or I would guess. But I also think you got to be careful with that because I think while David Mayo is a great run player, like we've talked about, and Atlanta runs the ball a ton, some of their best mismatch weapons are in the backfield and are at tight end. So, we haven't even mentioned Jonnu Smith-Schuster, Jonnu Smith.
Yeah,
wow.
No Smith-Schuster.
Got to get crazy there. Jonnu Smith, who is a mismatch for most linebackers in the NFL. Now, he doesn't always catch the football, but him, Kyle Pitts, big mismatch weapons. We just mentioned Smith, the fullback, great mismatch weapon. Bijan, huge mismatch weapon. Cordell Patterson, huge mismatch weapon. So I think you need to make sure that while stopping the run is important, those guys are explosive playmakers. And you said that they're not quite the same as what they are in San Francisco, and I totally agree. But, I think the core of that is more similar to San Francisco than dissimilar. And what I mean by that is I think Smith is the closest fullback to Kyle Juszczyk in the NFL. I think Bijan Robinson's the closest running back to Christian McCaffrey in the NFL. I think Kyle Pitts, while not George Kittle, is an explosive playmaker in terms of after the catch ability. And you have all those guys in the core. So the outside guys are probably not the yards after the catch explosive guys you traditionally associate with San Francisco, but the core of that is. And so when I'm bringing David Mayo in, or if I choose to make that decision, I need to make sure that I feel comfortable about whoever else is on the field that can match up with those playmakers. And that's going to be really challenging because anytime, Kyle Pitts doesn't play every single snap. I think he plays like 35, or he plays a little over 40% of snaps, maybe 50% of snaps. He's not in there all the time, but when he is in, that should probably be a different personnel grouping to match with that if I was going to say
yeah. So, and then the other guy that is worth mentioning, kind of their version of Deebo Samuel, Cordell Patterson, is back today for the first time in a while. So we will continue to monitor that as the day goes. Then we'll talk about it post-game. Our post-game show will be a little bit later tonight. Got some other things to do. So we will probably around 8-ish. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll just stay tuned. This is why you subscribe on YouTube. It's live on YouTube later on tonight and then be in your podcast feeds tomorrow. All right. When we get back here on the Take Command pregame show, we will take a look at the 6 players we identified on Friday's Hoffman show as essential to Commanders' victory, and I want to get Logan's thoughts on them. So we'll do that next before Grant Paulsen joins us here on the Hoffman show, or on the Take Command pregame show. That's another fine for me on Burgundy and Gold Game Day.
Playing Cincinnati?
That's not what depends on the story, but maybe we were playing Cincinnati.
So Logan catches this touchdown.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Cincinnati. Yep,
with Cincinnati. So we put in this play, and it was like I think we called it Hoss Juke or something like that. I can't remember what we called it in that offense, but Logan's on a seam, right? So he's our vertical threat, taking the top off the defense,
digging out, guys.
we're talking in the week. I don't think we ever said it in the install with those guys, but they're like, listen, Logan's not even in the progression. He's taking the top off this thing. We're trying to work this little option route down. And they bust this coverage. And I mean, he is screaming wide open.
I wasn't even supposed to be on the
shit.
play. They were supposed to sub somebody else in because I thought I was too slow to run this route. Just for the context here for everybody.
So he's screaming wide open. And I'm like, Matt, throw it at his back shoulder. You might hit him in stride. If you try and back shoulder him. Threw it right at him. He catches it. It was an awesome touchdown. Just the celebration afterwards was so much fun. For me, it was always fun celebrating the touchdowns with the guys that didn't score them all the time. You know, like
take that, Julio Jones.
Yeah, and I'm not, I'm saying that, but like your role for us was you did the dirty work, and when you see guys that do the dirty work get rewarded for it, that was really cool. Something I'll never forget. The caveman, and the caveman was in there in the end zone celebrating. It was awesome.
So there was this play where we call it like it was, what is it, 19 Zorro. So basically like versus a 3-4 structure with an outside linebacker who is Von Miller in this case, I would get help from the fullback, like on inside help. So I could be really aggressive on my reach, really violent to the reach. And so it was me and DY, is a physical son of a gun. And so we take Von Miller and we put him, like, no joke, in the water cooler. Like, we put him way out there on the sideline. And we were like, this guy ain't nothing. Like, we're going to, we were so fired up. And so it ended up being like a 25 or 30 yard gain. So we were all fired up. And Kyle's like, all right, let's come back to it. So like 2 plays later, we're running again and we're running to the right. And I was like, oh man, we are about to tee this dude up real quick. Just tune him up nice and good. And so I go out to get him and I'm firing off the ball. My hat's low. I'm flat back. And I swear to God, like he was about as close as my hand was to my face. And he just disappeared into like mist. And he like swung me and I fell right on my face. And I just was like, oh my gosh. And like I went back and watched the film and it was crazy how quickly he was able to like do his little basketball weave and then like just disappear from my vision and get inside and make the tackle. And I was like, oh, so now he's upset. So then the next play, I'm like all tentative and nervous. And I felt like Vaughn did. I watched this on film, so I knew he did this. But he does a really good job of like kind of like playing it like a boxer a little bit. You know what I mean? Like kind of rope-a-doping you a little bit. So like he lets you get one, right? Where I got after him. He makes you look like an idiot. And then the next time I was super tentative on him, and he literally did like a double stick like he was going to make me miss, and then just grabbed my neck and then threw me over the pile. I was like, man, this is going to be tough. I got to like think of a plan here in the next 15 minutes so I don't look like an idiot for the rest of the game. But, when you're playing elite football players like him, like there's a reason they're elite. So if you get one on them, it's probably because they want. They probably because they're letting you get one.
It's a trap. It's a trap.
It's a trap.
Take Command pregame show live at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen, with you here on the Team 980. Smoot's out here, so
Fred Smoot, man.
Things have gotten out of control.
The legend.
That's Smoot enters the building, chaos ensues. That's just kind of how it works. But the Commanders throw on a great party here that is outside the Commanders rally. So got plenty of burgundy and gold in the building. I don't know if there's any seats left at the bar. Like, it's starting to fill up for sure here.
This is a cool spot.
Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. We're live here, of course, not only on your radios, but on YouTube. So if you're driving around, running your errands, get back home, you can flip on your smart TV to 106.7 The Fan or the Team 980 on YouTube and give us a watch for the rest of the show. All right, so we do something on Fridays, Logan, called our Pick Six on the Hoffman Show. We wanted to bring it, try this out here on the Take Command pregame show. We pick 6 players that we think will have a big impact on the game. And we got our 6 players. They're going to run through them. We spend a little bit more time on some than others. Got about 7-8 minutes here before we take a break, and then Grant Paulsen joins us. The first guy's pretty obvious, Percy Butler.
Yeah.
He is elevated into a starter's role. He's going to play probably 100% of the snaps. What is your confidence level that Percy Butler can do his job, if you will, do your job, to the level that is needed against this Atlanta team today in his first career start?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to play the true post probably, or a guy that could drop into coverage more. And I think the thing about this defense is they don't. Now that I say that, is they don't play like a true post. They have both responsibilities, depending on the rotation, the formation, all that kind of stuff. So I think he's a good football player. You know, I've liked Percy. I've said that before. This is a tough game to be coming in as your first start because they do a lot of different stuff from a run, play action, keeper, move in the pocket, screens, double passes. That's all kind of on the table for this group. So I'd say it's going to be tough for him. I think he's physically capable of getting it done. I think he's had good games. I think early in the season he did some really good stuff. Obviously the Bears game wasn't his best game. But like you said, he's going to be in a starting role, bigger expanded opportunity for him. I'd give him, he's probably going to play in like a C-ish, C-plus type of range. And hopefully that's good enough to win the football game.
Yeah, just what kind of mistakes do you make? How explosive are the plays that you give up? You know, and that also, by the way, counts as a run player. If you got a run fit responsibility against the Atlanta Falcons, you better hit it. The other thing that I'm watching for with Percy is the communication. We'll talk more about that with another player on our list. Actually, let's go ahead. I'm going to swap the order here. When we do it on Fridays, we alternate because Anthony picks 3 and I pick 3. So Anthony's next guy is who I'm going to bump up here, and that's Cam Curl. Because to me, the biggest responsibility shift of the guys who are staying in their roles is Cam Curl. He has got to be even more on top of the communication as usual because all of a sudden everyone around him is younger because it's not just Percy. Obviously, Emmanuel's had some struggles, and then Quan Martin's going to be playing a lot more. And without Forrest next to him, a guy that communicates well, and obviously I think Derek's a young player too, but is at least got the experience underneath him. How does that back end communicate? Can you eliminate the coverage busts that have been problematic at times for this team over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's one thing that Percy, outside of the Bears game, is pretty good at. Is kind of being home for the most part. You know what I'm saying? He's not perfect, but he's going to be roughly in the right spot. And I think if Cam can kind of help him out, and some of that communication go on. Obviously, Kendall Fuller's out there. I think that, Fred talks about that all the time, is just having the ability to communicate well in the back end, corners, safeties. I think it'll be huge. And especially with new players, over-communicate if you're a senior player. Linebackers communicate with the safeties.
Yeah.
Everyone should be talking to make sure that we're on the same page and we're executing the way we need to execute. So, yeah, I think that'll be a big help for Percy. And the other thing that'll be a big help for Percy is if the defensive line comes up and plays good football.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. The other thing with Cam is he's probably your number one man responsibility for Kyle Pitts. So obviously a heavy responsibility there. My first pick was John Allen.
So you switch this. You go like, what's your producer?
Anthony.
Anthony goes, then you go?
Yeah, we each pick 3 and we alternated. It's a good time. Folks can check it out 6 o'clock on Fridays. Then on Mondays, actually, we check back in and see how we did. So we're an accountability show. My first pick, though, was John Allen because when we talk about this D-line, I think it was interesting. We talked about this off the top of the show, right, that apparently a lot of the do-your-job stuff this week wasn't even at Emmanuel Forbes. It was at this D-line, who we both look at and we're like, I don't know, I think they're playing all right. But they clearly, internally, think they can get to another level.
Sure.
One of the guys who can definitely get to another level is John Allen. And he has been the guy who's gotten more one-on-one opportunities than anybody else on that line, and he's just not winning at the rate that we're accustomed to. And I wonder if that is, the plantar fasciitis in his foot, whether that is the lack of conditioning because he missed the last half of camp and the plantar fasciitis is fine, but you have a lingering effect, or is it something else? But he's got to get on track for this defense to sing like it's supposed to.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that, like you said, doesn't seem like he's playing like himself, and there's a myriad of reasons for that. Obviously getting a little bit older, playing more than he's played in a couple years. I think that's something that could be corrected with a good rotation. F.A. Obata coming back is going to be a big help in that regard. And so I think that's something, to keep an eye on is how fresh does he look? I think coming off the bye or coming off this mini bye with the Thursday night game, I think he should be fresher. I think he's got a good matchup in Matthew Bergeron. He should be able to physically dominate and technically dominate that matchup. I think Matthew Bergeron's going to be a good pro, but he's got to develop and grow as a guard in the NFL. He played tackle in college, so I think that's something you want to see. And I definitely agree with that assessment. He's a guy that has been a little bit quiet, and I think needs to be playing a little bit better football at the moment. I think he'd probably tell you the same thing. And I think part of the frustration with him too is he's rushing with Chase, and we've talked about this on the podcast. Chase is kind of just letting it rip, and that's great for Chase. His production's the best it's been in his career, but that I think has had a negative effect on John in terms of how do I play off a guy who's going for it all the time. And so, John Kine said this on his podcast, and I emphatically agree with it, is that you need some people to kind of just do what they're supposed to do, and that's one of the reasons why the defense tends to play better or more efficiently as a group when Casey and James and those other guys are in there that are just kind of like, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. So I think I agree with John, but I think there's a whole bunch of other things kind of swirling around that John Allen lack of production that also need to improve, specifically like doing your job. And we've said that a ton on this show, but it's a really important element in getting productive defensive play.
All right, my next pick was Terry McLaurin. We talked about this earlier in the show, so I don't need to go too deep into it, but Atlanta wants a slower game flow.
Sure.
Terry's the most explosive offensive player. If you can hit some big shots, if you look at the great drives they've had this year, Terry is way more involved. When he gets the football, this offense goes, and that's pretty obvious because he's their best player. But he's also the guy that can blow the top off the defense most effectively, make Atlanta feel like they have to chase the game a little bit. And so I would love to see Terry get involved. Anthony had Sam Cosmi, who's got some interesting matchups potentially today inside. Can you get the run game going? Can he obviously going against a guy in Calais Campbell probably some of the day, who's probably the most similar player that he's faced so far this year to Fletcher Cox.
Yeah, Grady Jarrett.
Some veterans with some power. Didn't go great against Fletcher Cox. But the last guy I wrote down, who was kind of a proxy, that we haven't touched on this element of the game at all today, is Tress Way.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, you guys want to talk about the punter? Here's the thing. Christian Holmes is out today.
Yep.
Who is their best gunner.
Yep.
Percy Butler, who's their other best gunner, is starting at safety and thus unlikely to play as much on teams. Quan Martin is going to play more on defense. And, oh, by the way, the guy who is the all-pro special teamer and Jeremy Reeves is out for possibly the season.
Wow.
With a partially torn ACL. He's on IR and is not playing. So if I am Nate Katzer and if I'm Ron Rivera, I'm telling Tress Way to kick the ball out of bounds a lot today. Let's just not worry about punt coverage.
Or just be Tress. Just be the guy that you've seen him be. He's – you say out of bounds. He's been a great directional punter for most of his career. Yeah. And then obviously the last game against the Bears or against Philly, I forget which one it was.
Philly had a couple bad ones.
Had a little bit of struggle. And when you have an excellent punter, it can elevate the entire special teams group. And I think to your point, is it directional? Is it out of bounds? Let's peel that back a little bit. Who's going to be playing gunner? Because gunner, we've talked about this on the podcast quite a bit, probably not on the show. Gunner is the biggest driver of punt coverage production in the NFL. And if you get two guys out that are excellent, doesn't matter who else is covering. Now, the rest of those guys got to come to the party, and who's going to fill in those shoes as the gunners on that team?
Tariq Castrofield's certainly going to be one of them. He gets called up. And we'll see what they do at the other spot. Because Quan is also not for all the, I guess the struggles that we've talked about with Quan defensively in the preseason, part of their punt issues this year when they've had them has been on Quan, partially on Quan as well. I heard John say that on his pod as well. So, one, he's got more responsibility. Two, has he been excelling in that role? we'll see how they mix it up this week with all of that, all of those guys out. There's a lot to mix up on that punt coverage unit, so keep that in mind, and hopefully it's not an issue during the game. And when we review this tomorrow at 6 o'clock on the Team 980, it's like, check. Nice job, Tress Way and friends. All right, when we get back, Grant Paulsen joins us here on the Take Command pregame show. Half hour to go until kickoff of Commanders and Falcons.
And I think the other thing about knowing and doing your job is there needs to be a level of communication. Like, that's one thing when I talked to Fred about when he played with Sean Taylor and LaRon and, you know, D'Angelo or whoever the other corner was. Like, one of the things that they did a good job of is communicate those situations. It's like, we're coming out of the huddle, we're walking the line of scrimmage, and Cam would go, hey, or Smoot would go, hey, man, remember, I'm by myself here. Or Sean would be like, hey, you're by yourself. I got to help over here on the 3-by. And it just, that stuff is so powerful, and it takes ownership of a whole group to get there. So there are layers to this. There are things that can be done differently. And I don't think we're trying to assign blame here. We're kind of reasons and like with an onion, right? You pull back the first layer. People say, oh, St. Juice is playing bad. And it's like, well, he's playing hard, but is he playing bad because he doesn't know what to do or whatever it is? There's a level here. And I think
the way I've phrased it for the last week is like, we're on a quest for answers. But what do you see defensively from Atlanta? It was, I think, a bit of a different look than anything Washington's seen this year.
Yes, this was a really interesting film study because you're watching the film and you're like, I know this defense. Like, I know it. I can't pinpoint exactly. Like, the coverages aren't the same. And then I was like, what's going on here? So I looked it up, and the defensive coordinator was the D-line coach in New Orleans. And when I read that, I was like, oh, that makes 100% sense. Like, they play a New Orleans style of football, a New Orleans defensive style of football. And what I mean by that is they are fast and they are physical. They're not overly complicated. They don't bring a ton of pressure, but they're good at what they do. They don't mess around. They play hard in a way that is unique to that system. Like, talk about guys that know exactly what they're supposed to do. Well, you can tell they know exactly what they're supposed to do. This is maybe the most important thing about the Falcons, if there's all this information we just dropped, is Houston was never able to change the game flow. And what I mean by that is they were never able to put them in a situation where they're down 2 scores and they needed to stop running the ball. So they were able to run the ball for all 4 quarters, even though it wasn't the most efficient thing ever. And they were able to kind of stay within in the pocket of what they wanted to be from a play action standpoint, which again makes easier throws and easier opportunities for Desmond Ridder. Like, that is what this offense is, and it goes as Desmond Ridder goes. So if you can confuse him, if you can disguise stuff, if you can put him under pressure, like, you're gonna have an awesome day.
It's the Take Command pregame show here on a burgundy and gold game day. We will check in with the in-game show. Of course, Denton and Linnell take you through the game on the Team 980 all the way through. Doc and Linnell for the post-game show, so we will get to them.
That's a crew, huh?
Yeah, I mean, think about how those two have been over the last couple of weeks after some of the losses.
No, I can't even imagine.
I sometimes wonder when I get to work on Monday, will there be a studio for me to walk into?
And I will say, like, I do the post game with B. Mitch. And
similar deal.
Yeah, but he's been pretty good. He's been pretty well behaved.
keeps it within the lines.
Yeah,
That's
which is
nice.
good. But yeah, Doc never.
Doc
and
no.
Linnell never.
No.
Linnell, we did the in-game show last year, and Linnell would be having like mini panic attacks or something,
like
he'd
full-on meltdowns.
Yeah, like this is not, and you're just like, man, it's like the first quarter. It's like the first drive of the game.
Yeah, a guy who's always irrational, never has it together, always just emotionally all over the place. Never mind, that's not him. We go to Grant Paulsen for good measured analysis. Of course, host of Grant and Danny on 106.7 The Fan. GP, how are you, sir?
I am well. Good morning to you, fellas. How are you?
Doing well here at Tap Sports Bar. It's starting to fill up. Excellent atmosphere here to watch the game. Obviously we've talked a lot about the bounce back element this week for the Commanders, and I'll ask you the same question I asked Sheehan earlier in the show, which is when you think about this game in the larger context of new ownership, fans are really ticked after what happened against the Bears, and kind of the story arc of the season. How essential is it for them to play well? How essential is it for them to win to kind of keep some of the momentum that had been going?
Yeah, I think playing well is just a necessity for people to keep their jobs after this season. It's the fourth year of the program. Like, we should be past, hey, don't get embarrassed by Desmond Ridder in Atlanta, right? Having said that, I think that winning some of these games is becoming increasingly significant as well, guys. Look, when you spend $6 billion on something, and I've never done that. I know you guys did, but only once, I think.
Yeah. There was that one time.
Exactly. I think you want to put your fingerprints on it. And essentially what I thought coming into this year was that the Rivera regime, that's him, that's the Marty Party, that's the whole staff, they have to basically give the staff a reason not to. And at 2-3 with 2 bad losses in their last 3 where they weren't competitive, they're not doing that. And that's the goal this year. That's the mission, is that at the end of this season, even though these guys are going to want to recreate this thing in their image, you have to give them some trepidation and say, actually, I kind of like the trend here. And I point to like the Detroit Lions. I wasn't big on Dan Campbell initially when he was hired. I hated his first press conference. I think he came off like a meathead. But what I've realized is he's actually very smart. He knows what he's doing, and that's kind of his wrestler persona. And I bring up the Lions to say, look at the progress they've made. They've lost like 4 times since the middle of last season. That's what should be happening when a program is ascending and you're putting the pieces together. And I'm just kind of still sitting here twiddling my thumbs waiting on that in D.C.
So, obviously, what is your expectation for them today? I mean, like in terms of bounce back, you talked about the bigger picture there, but specifically with regards to today and today's matchup, how do you think they play?
I think they play well. I think this game comes down to the final minutes. I think it's a field goal at the end kind of contest. I'm not sure that they're going to be able to run the ball. Going back the last couple nights and rewatching Atlanta's games via Game Pass just condensed, they've done a really good job with run fits and not letting guys get going. Players like Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars would go 20 for 60 against this team, and the sandwich games are like 6 yards per carry against other teams. So I think they've been sharp there. I think you're going to have to keep Brian Robinson involved. You just have to do that to help keep Sam Howell upright and to keep the pass rush from getting home, although I will point out that Atlanta has the worst statistical pass rush in the National Football League this season in terms of sacks per pass attempt. Only them and the Giants, the opponents, the next 2 weeks, are averaging fewer than a sack per game at this point, so that's good news. But I think this is a Logan Thomas game. I think this is kind of a throwing the ball in the middle of the field between the numbers kind of contest. And I think the best way to move the ball against Atlanta is going to be throwing the football. I'd like to see a little more play action, by the way. I don't believe this number, but Pro Football Reference says that Washington's run 10 play action passes all season. I'm not sure that the calculation's correct, but I think we can all agree that it hadn't been a lot of play action. So I'd like to see a little bit more of that. I know it's on a big part of this offense, but maybe get Sam Howell under center, show some teams some new looks, and try to diversify things a little bit than just being in the gun and letting defenses know where he's at all times.
So super interesting stat on pass rush on the other side. Desmond Ridder has the worst time to sack number in the league. He's been one of the worst, if not the worst, quarterback in terms of how quickly is he sacked on the sacks he's taken in the league, and he's taken 16 of them, so it's not exactly a small number. Like, what does that tell you about what the Commanders can do from a pass rush standpoint today and the ability for that unit, which we've all wanted to see a little bit to a lot more from, getting right today against this Falcons team?
Yeah, it's a great point, Craig. I've got them winning because of their D-line today. If you go back to their 2 wins, and they were in weeks 1 and 2, right? Week 1, the D-line took over against an Arizona front that wasn't good enough to hold up against them. And in week 2, where I thought the matchup was a little bit more, fair, they did a really good job against Denver in the second half, and I thought they just destroyed that front and took the game over there too. I think it'll be that kind of game. The Falcons can be had from a pass rushing standpoint. Now, I will say they're going to do everything they can to get the ball out of Ritter's hands. They're going to quick game Washington. If you look at what they ask him to do, it's nothing. Like, if you're not a big fan of Desmond Ridder, just know that neither is Arthur Smith. And the way that they operate tells you that. He is 4th in the league in expected completion percentage. It's a lot of screens and throws at the line of scrimmage. He's still, by the way, 4th worst in NFL CPOE, which is, the completion percentage over expected.
Right.
He's not accurate. He misses a lot of those throws. They have the 9th lowest intended air yards. Everything is close to the line. So for that reason, I say you're not going to get a lot of chances on 5- and 7-step drops. But the stuff that you mentioned where he gets sacked early and quickly, a lot of times I think it's because they don't pick things up pre-snap. Like, you see free rushers against this team. You see guys that aren't accounted for. So if I'm Jack Del Rio, it shouldn't just be a let's rush 4 and win, which I think you can do that if you have time. It should be a crowd the line of scrimmage, have some linebackers in the A-gap, mugging, sometimes coming, sometimes not. Like that kind of game, because the Falcons have really struggled with the communication on picking guys up.
Yeah, I love that. Kind of diversify your pass rush profile there a little bit. I think is a really good idea. So you mentioned Desmond Ridder. Obviously, he is kind of the driver, and I think, we've talked a lot about the playmakers in this offense. What do you think about the playmakers of this group? Because they do have some dynamic athletes, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. How do you contain those groups, that group of playmakers, and how do we match up with them defensively?
I love Bijan Robinson, and I think he's going to have a big day. I think he's their best playmaker, both as a rusher and maybe right now in space as a receiver.
He's excellent.
He's unreal, dude. I mean, what an athlete. What a coup to draft. And everyone was mad where they drafted him. Like, I think that's silly. If you give him a second contract and pay him $15 million, we can have a conversation on if that's worth it. But when you add a player like that to an offense like this, right now, this moment, he's the hardest guy to defend. Like, that's hard to argue that you shouldn't have drafted him. But I look at him, he's 4th in what I call rushing yards over expected is the stat. So, like, essentially, 47% of the yards he's gained as a ball carrier this year are after he should have been tackled or the play should have been dead. About half the yards. Think about that. Only Devin Achane, who just got hurt, but the guy who's averaging, like, big 12 yards per attempt for the Dolphins, like 9 yards per carry. And then Brees with the Jets and Spears with Tennessee. And then Bijan Robinson, who's at 1.62 yards per attempt over expected. It's been incredible. So I think you have to account for him. I don't love the linebackers on him. I think he's going to catch a few balls he's going to go for 30 or 40 as a receiver today. But I'm not as worried about the playmakers. Like, you look at it, and maybe this is a scheme thing. You would know better, and you would be able to tell me why, Logan, if you watched the tape. But, like, Drake London right now is bottom 7 in the league in separation.
Yeah.
Van Jefferson, who they just traded for, is 8th worst in the league. Kyle Pitts is bottom 20 in that same category. So it tells me some of it has to be not just the players, right? But at the same time, like Drake London, when Washington was looking at drafting him, and I liked him fine, he is a box you out, get rebounds wide receiver.
100%.
He's not an explosive, like, he's not routing you up, and he's not Jahan Dotson, yeah? So I kind of like these matchups more for guys like Benjamin St-Juste or Kendall Fuller. Like, it's not DJ Moore necessarily who's going to get open by, at the top of the route, like leaving you in his dust. So I'm not as worried about that, and maybe it's just at the end of the day that I'm not a big believer in Desmond Ridder, frankly. And he threw for 3 bills, his best game last week. Do I really think he has 2 of those in the bag? I'm not sure.
Well, that sounds like we've got to lean on your pick then. GP, who do you got?
I've got Washington in a tight game. Now, again, I don't think this is going to be fun the whole time watching this thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be easy because Atlanta's very well coached. I'm a big Arthur Smith guy. I've always loved him and Stefanski as play designers and Marion play action and just some of the things that they do. And I think the Falcons' defense is legit way better than we think. Just because they don't rush the quarterback, they get no respect. But they're actually pretty sharp, other than defending tight ends this year, which is why I think Logan Thomas has a big day. But I say 23-20 Washington. Joey Sly's lining up for a game winner from 45. And let's just hope that snap gets where it needs to go.
Oh, God. Thanks for bringing that back up. It does feel like Younghoe Koo is always lining up for a game-winning kick when they are at home. Desmond Ridder has actually never lost at home, so we'll see if the Commanders can break that trend and that streak today. Grant Paulsen, 2 to 6:30 each and every weekday on 106.7 The Fan. GP, thank you, sir, and enjoy the game.
Greatest quarterbacks ever. It's like Manning and Brady and Montana, and then it's home Ridder and road Howell. Remember, 2 games on the road. Sam Howell's been
and facing Washington, Daniel Jones, but we'll talk about that next week. All right, that's Grant Paulsen, everybody, with us here on the Take Command pregame show. When we get back, we will wrap it up. We will give our predictions, our keys to the game. Denton Day from the in-game show will join us, and then we'll hand it off to he and Linnell Willingham for your game coverage. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen with you here on a Burgundy and Gold game day.
This is a team that plays hard. They play physical. They play tough. So, all this talk about, guys not being ready or guys not wanting it, like, this is a game where you shut people up about that. If you come out and you say, this team is trying to be physical, they're trying to punch us in the mouth, and it's not just the Lions punching people in the mouth. Algiers runs maybe the hardest running back in the NFL. He runs hard. They have a fullback, Kendall Smith. Like, he's an excellent blocker. He's an excellent pass catcher. They got big receivers who block. They are going to come after you, and they are going to draw. Like, Jonnu Smith is one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL from, like, a physicality standpoint. So they're going to draw a line in the sand, and they're going to say, are you going to step to this, or are you going to back up? And I really think if fans say that this isn't important, they don't care about this team doesn't care, like, this is going to be a really good litmus test for that, because it's going to be a physical, tough matchup, and it's going to feel like a very traditional football game. And what I mean by that is something from like the late 90s, early 2000s, where it's like, we're gonna do what we do, you're gonna do what you do, and let's see what happens. So I think that I'm kind of excited for that matchup, because I think it's going to help kind of inform like where this defense is at. Someone came to me in our stats department and said, hey, Logan, you have the most fumble recoveries from your own team of anybody in the division. I said, that's a weird statistic. But it wasn't like I was trying to go out and recover all these fumbles. Like, my mindset was just like, I'm not a good football player. Like, I'm well aware of that. Like, it was just play as hard as you can for as long as you can was really my philosophy. And so you're around the ball, you're blocking somebody, you're around the pile, I'm in the shot, and the ball pops down. It's like, oh, I'm just going to jump on that because it's right there. And so it can lead to good things, very productive things. And I think I had four fumble recoveries that year, just being near the pile, and I think that, effort in that context is never a negative. And I think that's something, guys need to be fresher, guys need to be healthier, whatever it is. Like, all those things are important, but that's something against this Falcons team, because of how they play offensively, because of how they play defensively, I think we're going to need to see a little bit more of it. And I fully expect to. I fully expect to see that today.
He's ready.
Final segment here on the Take Command pregame show. I think I'm going to do it standing, Logan.
I think that's right. If I could do this whole show standing, I'd probably do it.
Yeah, we'd have to fix the camera. You're very tall.
I know, it's too tall.
I just have to sloop down a little bit, and I still am in the shot. Snoop down, stoop down, sloop. I don't know. We're making up words.
Yeah, we're making up words.
We've been on the radio a long time. We've been on YouTube for a long time. We should be back there later tonight for the Take Command post-game show. Stay tuned to your social media platforms for the information on that, moving things around. Typically 90 minutes after the game, but Washington Spirit have a playoff game, or basically a playoff game today at Audi Field, and I am not missing that. Yeah. So once I'm home from that,
you got a friend on the team, though, right?
I used to work there.
Oh, right.
So
yeah.
my day becomes very stressful starting at 1 o'clock. Obviously, always concerned with what's going on with the Commanders.
100%.
3 o'clock, WNBA Finals, Game 3. My girl Alicia Clark, one of my great friends, and the Aces can close that out, and then the Spirit at 5. So I got a heavy day of sports watching to do here, but that's okay, Logan. I'm built for it.
No, yeah, you're built different, is what they say.
I think I'm built the same as most people are going to spend most of their Sundays watching sports. All right, so here's what we got. We got Denton Day back in our D.C. studios. This is, of course, Logan and I are live at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. You can join us 3 hours prior to the game every single week here in Oxon Hill, Maryland. But Denton is ready to anchor our in-game show back in D.C. Denton, how are you on this fine Sunday?
Gentlemen, I want you guys to understand I am a team player, and I also tried to do this final segment standing so I could stand alongside my brothers, you guys, but the mics don't extend that far.
No, they don't. They don't. Especially you're in the fan studio, right? Not the 980 studio.
Yeah, so they really do not extend.
Yeah,
that
no,
far.
those mics are bad for standing. The 980 mics are a little bit better.
I like the 980 mics.
Yeah, you can move around a little bit in that studio. We got some wiggle room. Not so much in the fan studio. They were designed to try to keep the junkies who like to wriggle around in their spot so they can be on television.
That's smart.
You know, it is
Coach
what it
to your
is.
personnel.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
All right, so end of the show every week, we give our keys to the game, and then we give our player to watch, keys to the game, and a prediction. We can be a little bit, well, I guess we're running short on time. I didn't realize what time it was. So maybe even though Linnell's not with us, we still got to be pretty quick here. So, Denton, let's get things started. Player to watch.
So I think the player to watch is going to be Percy Butler. He's obviously going to get an extended role today than what we've seen the first couple of weeks. But, guys, one of the things that we, the Commanders, I should say, have had problems with for years is covering the tight end position. I think Percy Butler might see a good, healthy dose of Kyle Pitts today, or somebody will, and that does have me worried a little bit. So I think he's going to be the key to the game. The last thing we want to see is Kyle Pitts going crazy against the secondary.
Yeah, for me, it's Corn Lucas, old Cornelius Lucas, man. He's a guy that I think is an excellent football player, was one of the most consistent guys during training camp, so I feel very confident about him coming in. But anytime you add a new piece in, especially kind of last minute, it can be really challenging, but I expect big things from him. And, one of the big things is keeping Sam Howell upright, seeing the football field, making those run blocks. And I think he's a guy that, has done well with these opportunities in the past, but I think he's going to be a big part of if they do get a win, he'll be a big part of it.
We used to bar John Allen for being an eligible answer for this segment.
I think we can get him back in here.
But I think he's eligible today. He has not played up to his own level this year. So can John Allen get back, take advantage of a rookie? I hate to see the young Syracuse Orangeman get blasted, but can he take advantage of Matthew Bergeron? It's been a good week for Syracuse football players being blasted, but we don't need to talk about that. Can John Allen take advantage of a rookie? Also, can he at least draw doubles where maybe Deron Payne winds up with some one-on-ones? So, how does Atlanta mix that up? Obviously, he's an essential part to their run defense as well, and we will see how that goes today. All right, our key to the game and the way we do this, if you're new to the show, is we try to predict a stat and say if this thing happens statistically, we feel good about a Commanders victory. Denton, get us started.
If the Atlanta Falcons have less than 2 explosive plays, I feel pretty darn good about the Commanders' victory. I know that's a lot easier said than done, but if I see a viral clip of Bijan Robinson doing something insane where he's putting the ball behind his back and crossing over again, I'm going to be sick. And if I see a guy like Drake London or Kyle Pitts absolutely go bonkers on this defense, I'm going to be sick. So if they can hold Atlanta to under 2 plays of more than 20 yards, I think that puts this team in a good spot.
I mean, that is a good one. I feel like he stole yours. Did he steal yours?
No, that's a really good one.
Yeah, it is a good one. So for me, it all stems around for me, I'm going to say managing game flow is what I'm going to say. That's the biggest one for me. So offensively, can you put a little bit of pressure on them? Can we score on our first drive? Defense, can you get a stop early? And then offense, can you respond with a score? So if it's 14-0, that gets them out of what they want to do. It puts the ball in Desmond Ritter's hands, and I say that is the Atlanta Falcons team that I want to be playing against.
I'm trying to think how we convert your very good analysis into an easily digestible statistic.
Well, we should have done some research before we started.
How about time of possession?
I was going to say
Game
time
flow.
of possession, but also it's more of like, does each team run more or less than 65 plays?
Yes.
If it's more, especially if it's the Commanders running more, that speaks to the Commanders being able to speed up the game a little bit. If it's less, that's probably more in Atlanta's favor.
100%.
So it's kind of like number of possessions in a basketball game, except for now it's just number in a football game and number of plays, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go with, if Brian Robinson has over 90 yards, I feel pretty good about the Commanders
Total yards?
winning. Rushing yards.
Okay.
I feel pretty good. And you could say if the running backs combine for 140 yards total all-purpose yards, if you want to mix Gibson in there. But that just means they've controlled again that game flow and they're in a good place with it. They don't have a bunch of turnovers. You're not going a bunch of 3-and-outs. For those guys to get carries, you need to be able to convert, be efficient, and run a lot of plays. So if that happens, Brian Robinson absolutely will be above that number. If not, and they're chasing the game again, and it's a bad situation, then he probably won't. So with that, Denton, you go first on the picks.
I wish I was more excited about my pick. I really do. I think the Falcons win this one. I think it's 27-20. I don't think Desmond Ridder blows the doors off, but I think they find explosive plays on offense. And we have the same old with the defense. We're asking ourselves the same question. Why do they continuously allow explosive plays? So, unfortunately, I think this will be a rough afternoon for the Commanders.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to – I'm not as sold on the explosive play thing because I don't think they have a lot of explosive players outside of their running backs. And I don't know, traditionally, obviously Cordell Patterson, if he plays wide receiver, he's an explosive waiting to happen. Bijan Robinson, but I don't see their kind of starting receivers as being these explosive guys. I do see a physical football game. I see a tough football game. That 21-19, that 21-20 type score where it's kind of the last possession, game-winning field goal type deal, I think is going to be the nature of this game. And so I'm not going to predict a victory or a loss for the Commanders. I'd like for them to win, obviously, but it is going to be – it's too close to call almost for me. It's going to be –
That's not how predictions work.
That's what I'm going to do, man. It's just it's going to –
makes his own rules.
It's going to be such a close game from a physicality standpoint. It's really comes down to the person with the ball last. I'll say Commanders 21-20, but
there you go. We bullied him into
but
it.
But again, man, to me it's almost too close to call.
You got to play mental warfare. If I get in a physical fight with this man, it's not going to end well for me. 21-19, I will take the Commanders with a victory. But I do think all jokes aside, your analysis is very, very good. I do think that it will be a close game. The game flow is going to be kind of right on that line. See if Commanders can get a couple explosives and run away with it. If not, buckle in. It's going to be a long and stressful afternoon. To guide you through it, Denton Day and Linnell Willingham. They are next. For Logan Paulsen, I'm Craig Hoffman, live here at Tap Sports Bar. This has been the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day.